Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 159. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comics forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the Whatnot Segulin. May is always a busy time of the year with ending off the school year for me, so I'm trying to scramble to get together a few segments that we've been trying to work on for the last couple of months. In the opening segment, we have a quick little opener that I'm joined by Micah, who's Do What from the forums, as we discuss Blackest Night number 0, and we do a little discussion about Legion of Free Worlds number 4. There was a lot of events going on in that one that really needed to be discussed now. I recorded actually another hour plus with Micah that I'm going to be airing on a future episode, but those are the ones that were the timely features that I really wanted to get out of there, and I want to thank Micah for joining me on that segment because we had a lot of fun. Also in our main feature this episode, we are joined by Russell Burlingame of Comic Related, and we're going to be discussing Booster Gold number 19. We have a discussion about extras and features that are on comic-related DVDs, and as fans, what do we feel about the digital medium and how that's all working out? So we have a big discussion about that. We also have a nice discussion about things like Young Liars. We do a tangent about Green Lantern. So it's a pretty hefty and packed segment. We've also got a wonderful BK's Bullets segment about the Wonder Woman DVD. Also on our Raging Reel, which is kind of a thing I've been using now to put a lot of the things that we're able to discuss that are a little outside the DC universe. From New York, we did a discussion with the people from roddenberry.com, and I couldn't think of a better episode to put this on than this one with the Star Trek movie opening up. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Blackest Night number 1, written by Jeff Johns, art and cover by Ivan Rice, and Eau Claire Albert, with a variant cover by Ethan Van Sciver. The sketch variant covers by Ivan Rice and Eau Claire Albert. Jeff Johns and Ivan Rice raise the dead in the most anticipated comic story of the year. Throughout the decades, death has plagued the DC universe and taken the lives of heroes and villains alike. But to what end? As the War of the Light rages on, the prophecy of the Blackest Night descends upon us, with Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps at the center of it all. Don't miss this 8-issue epic taking the DC Universe beyond the grave. This issue will ship with 3 covers, so there's a lot of variant editions that are available on the DCBService.com site, but $3.99 regularly, 75% off, only 99 cents. This is a great chance now with these $3.99 price points to get this book at 99 cents. So if you're not shopping at DCBService.com, you definitely want to consider doing that. Booster Gold number 22, we're going to be talking Booster Gold on the show. Regularly $3.99. With the discount, 40% off, only $2.39. Whatever your shipping preferences, your bag and boarding preferences, DCBService.com accommodates your collecting needs. I want to talk about InStockTrades.com. Superman and the Legion of Superheroes hardcovers brought up on this episode. This is the run by, it's Action Comics 858 to 863. It's a prelude of sorts to the stuff that you're seeing right now in Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds. It kind of sets the stage for where that 31st century future is right now. It's regularly $24.99, 37% off, only $15.74, which is a great discounted price to pick up a hardcover for. If you didn't read that one and you're really enjoying Legion of Three Worlds right now, I highly recommend picking up that story. InStockTrades.com offers free shipping on orders of $50 or more and has a ton of collected editions in stock and ready to ship. Thanks for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. We're also sponsored this episode by the Collection Drawer Company. The Collection Drawer Company is excited to announce their latest companion product exclusively for drawer boxes. Drum roll, please. Box Sort Upright Dividers. With these, drawer boxes become the drawer box storage system, the hobby's only complete organizational system for comics. I know what you're thinking. What the devil are upright dividers? Let's back up. For a number of years, we have read or heard complaints from collectors about their comics sliding around and falling all over when a long or short box is only partially filled, sometimes causing bent issues and small cracks in the spines. Usually, collectors try to solve the problem by keeping the box as full as possible. But then, when they add issues, there's no room, which means they need to move comics from one box to the other as the collection grows, creating more work. Alternatively, other collectors stuff whatever packing material they can come up with in the empty space until they're ready to fill the rest of the box. Upright dividers are a new product we have spent over a year developing. Box sort upright dividers actually hold the comics upright in the box and keep them from sliding around no matter how few comics are in it, eliminating the risk of bent comics and spine cracks. As the drawer fills, the divider can be adjusted by moving it back, accommodating any quantity. But here's the best part. By using multiple upright dividers in a drawer, collectors can even create sections for each title and, if they prefer, create their own spaces between titles so that they have room to add more issues later. Have comics in a separate box because you haven't read them yet? Now you can create adjacent sections for read and unread issues. Simply move the issues into the read section when you're done. No more shuffling comics from box to box or even pulling a stack of comics to file one or two issues. Box sort upright dividers can help collectors sort and keep their collection organized like they've never been able to do before without needing to do a lot of work. And like all drawer box products, box sort upright dividers are retrofittable into older drawer boxes with the retrofit kits. With this addition, Drawer Boxes has become the drawer box storage system, the only complete organizational system for comics. Only the Collection Drawer Company custom manufactures its cardboard to make it as strong as possible. Because drawer boxes are the strongest storage container made for comics, they can be stackable up to 6 units high to maximize the square footage, yet all you need to do is locate any comic is to open up the drawer with no more stacking and restacking of heavy boxes. Long and short drawer boxes can be combined and linked together with box locks, box anchors in any configuration to fit any space and remain secure with no tipping or slippage, allowing the top unit to remain open to hang on its own as easily as the bottom. And now the contents can be organized and sorted to meet the needs of any collector, with every issue immediately accessible. Volume discounts are available so you can convert your entire collection to this system, and more information can be found and orders can be placed at www.collectiondrawer.com. I want to talk about this. I actually have had collection drawer boxes. Years ago I heard about it on the Comic Geek Speak podcast, and I did convert my entire long box collection over to collection drawer boxes. And it was before they had the box locks and these new dividers. One of the things I want to say about them, I did retrofit my boxes to these, and that's how actually they became a sponsor to our show, because we were chatting about them with Jason Page quite recently, and I ordered the retrofit kit. It was so easy to modify my boxes now, and before, the wonderful thing about the collection drawers, I've been able to open up the drawers. I talk on the show all the time about rereading your comics. There's a lot of times where we'll pull out old comics specifically for the purpose of talking about them on the show, but there's other times where I'll just do it for fun. I'll pick out books and I'll reread them and just have a good time with them. With the old long boxes that I used to have, literally, there's stuff that was buried in my collection I never saw again. It sat down at the bottom. Second I switched over to drawer boxes, even when I was putting things into the drawer boxes, I started making stacks of books that I wanted to reread. I love the fact that with these new dividers, I can create sections in each drawer of things that I want to read again, and really just kind of make a different organizational strategy on books that I've read that I want to set aside for a while, and books that I want to read again soon, so I don't have to keep everything out of the drawer boxes. I've previously had stacks, and Jim can attest to this next time we record. Every time he comes into my office, I've got stacks of comics sitting here, and they're comics that I want to read. That's really the purpose of them. So they're not even in my drawer boxes because I want to read them. Now that I've retrofitted with these upright dividers, I can start doing exactly what they said and start making sections inside those boxes and keep things organized and keep my collection safe. We all collect these books because we want to keep them in good condition to be able to be read over and over again, or for those of you that are collecting and looking for monetary value down the road with the books, you want to keep them in pristine condition. This is a great storage system because whatever your purpose is, whatever you're looking to do with your collection, you're able to access the books nice and easily. You're able to protect them. I have been in so many long boxes, comic book spines and things like that, and I am very careful with my collections. I really try to keep my books in neat condition for my own personal purposes. I'm a comic reader, but when I read my comics, I like to make sure my comics are in the same condition they were in when I purchased them, just because it's important to me to have that same brand new experience with the books every time. It's the collector's mentality that's there for me. I want my books looking as pristine as possible. That we all strive for that constant mint condition, or near mint as we can keep all of our books. So it is something that is important to me, and this system is something I have no problem endorsing. If you haven't tried these, go to collectiondrawer.com, check them out. They're definitely something I can recommend picking up. pick up a batch of them, and it will change everything. Jim, I know, has them as well, and we'll on our next ad with them, Jim and I will both talk a little bit more about both of our experiences with collection drawers, because they're a wonderful product, and I hope you give them a shot, because it's something that will really change the way you access your collection. So thanks for your sponsorship, collectiondrawer.com. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
You filthy criminals.
For this segment, I'm joined by Micah Griffin, who's Duet from the forums, and we're going to be discussing real quick Blackest Night #1, and we discuss Legion of Three Worlds #4, and we just have a really fun, nice discussion. There will be some more content coming from him, either next week or the week after. I've got some extra segment from him that I just wasn't able to fit on this episode because I wanted to get this out on time. But I want to thank him for joining me for this segment, because I really wanted to get this out in a timely fashion. And Jim's brother's in from out of town. It's his brother he talked about, who's over in Iraq, and they're doing a big family get-together. So, in this case, the show must go on, and Micah was kind enough to join me on this one, and we had a really good time, so I hope you guys enjoy this segment as well. So, Blackest Night #0, let's start talking about this baby, because
Fantastic.
The oath, the blackest night falls from the skies. The darkness grows as all light dies. We crave your hearts and your demise. By my black hand, the dead shall rise. I know I'm opening with that, which is interesting, because the real opening is Hal in the cemetery, but when I saw that oath in there, I'm like, I want to open by talking about that. I gotta say, these oaths really could have been like throwaway things, but I love how Johns and crew have really personalized these oaths to each of the different colors, or, in this case, the Black Lanterns, and made them each something, because the Green Lantern oath is very iconic, and
yes.
it's something where you can't help. Every time I see it in the comics, when they have the various lanterns do it, I get a chill. I think it's a very cool. It's as cool to me as the bat signal when it's used properly, or Superman flying above the earth. There's certain iconic things like that, and these oaths deliver that same kind of charge. So I really give credit for introducing this new concept to the mythos, and yet putting the care into these oaths to make them just as interesting and cool as the original.
It reminds me of, I don't know, back in the 70s or before, maybe earlier than that, where all the Green Lanterns had their own personal oaths. Mm-hmm. Those are all different, and they cater to each particular character, and this is much the same thing like that, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it really does, though, especially because the war that's coming up that we're going to be all reading about, it's going to be very clear that these oaths and strengths, because right in the back of the book, they talked about the strengths and weaknesses of each of the different rings, and how we don't know yet how some rings are going to interact with each other and what they might bring to weaknesses that certain lanterns aren't aware of yet. We got the Orange Lantern who does a lot of absorbing, but what happens when Indigo's thrown in the mix? And I love that there's these question marks because certain lanterns haven't encountered each other yet, that we're going to see an interesting little twist out of the whole thing.
Yes, and I like how the powers aren't all fleshed out yet, so there's still some room for surprises.
Because, I think they could have fed us everything immediately, and I think something would have been lost there. I think this unfolding mystery that and again, I think that connects us with our Earth lanterns, the Earth-based ones that we're following, or, the classic lanterns such as Kilowog and people like that, who we've been following for years, and the new ones from the Green Lantern Corps series. There's something about following their journey to discovery of these new lanterns. Like the Orange one, Agent Orange came out of nowhere for all of them. This has been this deep, dark secret that this is off limits. You guys can't go there. Now all of a sudden, hey, look, mine's in the picture, and it's changed the whole dynamic for them. It's going to be interesting, the reckoning that's going to have to come. I'm convinced at this stage that there is going to be a reckoning for the Guardians at some point in time, either during this or after, from their own lanterns. Because they're going to be like, what is this?
There has to be, especially for all the old-timers that have been there for a long time and know that whatever's going on here just is not right. And they should have known about this a long time ago when they joined the Corps. You should know that there's an Orange Lantern out there somewhere who's like just crazy guy. You should know that exists in the universe. Like, that's a safety risk.
the issue opens up in the cemetery with Hal, and I was really glad to see this internal reflection from Hal. We've seen a lot of famous arguments between Batman and Hal, and they usually ended in the classic punch, but when you go into life and death battles with someone, you come to respect them as an ally and ultimately as a friend. It's almost like Hal needed to sort out his own feelings as a way to deal with Bruce's death, and I loved that introspection. Like, who is this guy to me? What was that relationship to me? And I know it's important to me, but how did it fit into my life, and how did I fit into his? I loved that because I think we all really do that.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism that you have, especially for someone that you don't actually get along with, but you have respect for. It's hard to deal with sometimes. You have to take time away to yourself and think about this and how it makes you feel that they're gone now. Even if you didn't like them, they're an important part of your life, and now they're going to be gone for what you assume might be forever.
It's interesting to me. We know from Final Crisis that Bruce seems to have escaped Darkseid's Omega Sanction, where, living successive lives, each worse than the other. And I can't help wonder on some level if this isn't what was in the Neil Gaiman two-part story. But regardless of all that, chronologically, I'm wondering, did Bruce already beat it? Or can he be used by the Black Lanterns? Will they be unable to use him because he's alive? That's a mystery for me at the moment. Like,
or
is
can they
Bruce...
use his body?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm wondering. Is he on the table or not? But then I'm wondering, at least my understanding was from the way I read Final Crisis, that they shot his body out in that capsule. So is his body even there to act? I don't know. I guess Bruce is a big question mark to me at the moment. And I'm interested to see if he's brought in, or, they showed Thomas and Martha Wayne's stones there as well. So, are they going to... I'm imagining Bruce is the one that would be targeted by Black Hand. I don't know. I'm curious to see, or if that's how they find out that Bruce is still alive because they couldn't. I don't know.
Possibly.
I don't know.
I have a question about this cemetery, though. Mm-hmm. Are all the superheroes buried here? Is this where, or at least where they put all the headstones at for all of the guys after they die?
I'm wondering on that because I have a hard time believing they'd all be buried where Bruce's parents are.
Exactly.
Or if maybe Hal and Barry were going, to multiple cemeteries. I would guess, a Ralph and Sue who are publicly might be buried. But they showed Arthur Curry's, for example, and his tombstone was clearly somewhere else. So I'm guessing, at least my impression of it was that they were going to more than one spot. At least I'm hoping, because that would be real cheesy if they all just happened to be in one place. I would buy some of them.
It'd be a safety risk to have them all in one place, because if you knew who some of these guys were, you could make inferences to other people. Like having Thomas and Martha Wayne anywhere near Sue and Ralph would be a kind of a giveaway.
Well, I don't see Bruce ever going for that, but I could see maybe like a Sue and Ralph in the same cemetery as a Ronnie Raymond or something like that. I would buy that maybe certain B-list leaguers. The B and C list characters, like maybe they would wind up in the same spot somehow. Even that seems to be a little bit of a stretch to me. So I guess I was choosing to take it that they were, unless they show me otherwise, that they were in more than one spot. But I agree with you that there were multiple times when I was reading it where I'm like, I can't tell if this is the same spot or not.
I wasn't sure because I was wondering, well, we'll get to it at the end, but what skull he was holding.
Yeah, that was interesting to me as well. Because I'm with you. I'm still not sure on that. I loved Barry and Hal's discussion about Tim Drake. Barry doesn't know him, but he connected with the optimism that his mentor is still alive. And I guess that's how I was reading it, that Barry found that to be very, very interesting, because he comes from that world.
Right. And very uplifting to see that even though, in this dark time, someone has hope still. Hal is over here being kind of a spoil sport.
It was what was interesting too, though, that Barry still felt out of sorts, which is something we're seeing right now from him in Flash Rebirth. So I liked the consistency in the sense that somebody who's not reading Flash Rebirth right now has an idea of where Barry's at from the tone of this. So it's great.
He doesn't know everything.
Right, exactly. And I liked how that felt very natural to what we're seeing from him in there. So it really does make that an interesting issue because it puts all of the readers, whether they're reading Barry's book or not, on the same playing field, understanding Barry's status quo currently.
Exactly. The funeral discussion was very poignant, I think.
Oh, especially when they were talking about their own deaths, if that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Where Hal's pointing out how Barry's was like this hero, oh my gosh, look what happened to the conquering hero. And I like it that Hal, is reflecting on really the tragedy that happened to him when he turned into Parallax. And I love how that story has so changed, because back when the Parallax story originally came out, that was not the way it was meant to be. And
Exactly.
they've done a wonderful job of shifting that tone so well that I had to think about it. I'm like, that really wasn't the way that it played out when it was originally written.
Because I took time to actually, after Sinestro Corps, I took time to go back and read some of the old stories and how the Parallax thing came about, and how Hal Jordan was evil, and then he died, and became the Spectre and all that. And it's interesting to see how things have changed over the years to make it not as crazy as it was when it first happened. Because that was a really sinister thing that went on with Hal Jordan back then. Going
back to our original point, I'm looking through the issue when they're having this discussion, and it does seem like Hal and Barry are stationary. They're staying in front of the Wayne tombstones, but we're seeing flashes to these other tombstones. So, we never actually see them. I'm looking to see if we actually ever see them leave.
That makes sense. They don't move.
Because if you take a look,
one statue of the angel is there the entire time.
Right. So when we're seeing these other cemeteries, it's not actually Barry and Hal going there. You're seeing Barry and Hal when they leave in that last shot where Bruce is my friend, which I do want to talk about that as well.
Yes.
When we see Hal and Barry leaving there, they're actually leaving that tombstone. So that's why I guess I'm assuming I think we're meant to see flashes of different tombstones as a way of reflecting on the dead they have lost in the League. I'm wondering, who is the person? It almost looks like, though, because Black Hand's watching them. So I'm saying I'm going to go with that skull as Bruce. He just yanked Bruce's skull out. Because if you look at the shape of the tombstone, it's the same tombstone that's next to his parents.
Very true.
He's pulling out it's got to be Bruce's head that he's pulling out of there. So is he bringing back Bruce? This is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
I wonder if this would be part of the Omega Sanction in any way. Maybe then coming back as a Black Lantern would be part of this, your life getting worse and worse. If you ended one life and you woke up in the next life as a Black Lantern, how would that throw you?
Yeah, I'm wondering, too, chronologically, though, if, what we've seen with him, with his escape from all that, on some level hasn't completed yet. Although, if he escapes the Omega Sanction, who's to say he has to jump back into his old body?
It's very true. It's very true.
I love that it's funny, I don't need that spoon-fed to me right now. I don't need to know exactly what's happening. I'm not sold on any one thing with this, but I really like the mystery of this right now, because with Bruce, we're all assuming he's coming back, especially with what they teased at the end of Final Crisis. But I like that we don't know what that looks like on any level. What happened to him? Where exactly is he now? Was what we saw at the end of Final Crisis actually him being done or not? And it leaves open the option that could really, they could bring him in as a Black Lantern.
That would be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Especially in light of what's going on in the Bat universe right now, and the fact that there is going to be a Batman miniseries as a part of Blackest Night. There's a 3-issue. They're breaking down those multiple 3-issue miniseries, showing how Blackest Night affects those different universes. So there's a Batman one, a Superman one. So it'll be interesting to see what opportunities they take. It almost makes sense to have Bruce come back.
Oh, that should be a blast.
Yeah. When you're talking about the funeral commentary, too, besides just comparing their own deaths, I really did like when they were the distinction of Bruce and Barry's relationship, where it was discussing police work and forensics and the things that they would just naturally relate to. But then Hal and Bruce bonded over something different, the death of a parent, or the death of parents in that case. I have a number of close friends that are like brothers to me. Each of those relationships is unique in what we find as common ground that connects us. And that was another element where this is very character-driven. It read very realistic to me. And it, again, taking the Zero issue to give us another emotional connection to these guys and make them feel like friends and real. Like when he flew off and said, Bruce was my friend, Barry saying he was my friend too. Yeah, I feel that. I'm mine too. But I mean, those are those moments I think great writers know how to bring about those emotional connections, that sense of you're thinking like, wow, this is really happening and this is real time. It's no longer a flat page. This is jumping out at me.
Yeah, it elicits an emotional response about these two characters who, like, it works. It's a very well done piece right there by Jeff.
Especially with the depth of the discussion on how death seems less permanent in their line of work and how they regret that their parents in similar relations can't return. That was fantastic.
Exactly. Now, about Aquaman, were they really close friends, or was that just an example of someone?
He was part of the original league with them. So
right.
Arthur Curry for them, especially that was why when they were showing that all the shots that they have of their league that they showed in this, in the flashbacks, Aquaman was featured in there, was Arthur Curry.
Right. That was the first league then.
But I also like, going off of what you're saying, not only did they show Aquaman there, but they also showed them in their classic costumes that fit that era. Like, I think it would be very easy for an artist to put Hal in his current costume, because there's been a slight tweak to it. But if you take a look at Hal, they put him back in the old suit. The mask is slightly different. The outfit's slightly different. We see Martian Manhunter, who I'm pretty convinced he's going to appear in this Blackest Night thing as well.
Oh, definitely.
So, I mean, those are two guys, really out of the leaguers there. You're looking about, there's 3 out of the 7 they show in the one page where they show Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Flash, Hal, Martian Manhunter, and Aquaman. I'm assuming those 3 are all going to be in Blackest Night from what they're showing now.
That's what it looks like.
I never thought Bruce.
Me either. I thought he was going to be out of play in like the entire DC universe until whatever happened with Batman was going to transpire. I didn't expect to see him this soon, but I trust these guys.
Well, it makes sense though. Like if there's a way to do it and to pull it off, it almost makes sense that you would have Bruce, because it almost seems like a missed opportunity to play around with that.
And if these guys are not zombies, in fact, why wouldn't you want Bruce on your side if you're a Black Lantern?
Well, it seems like they're pulling all the big wigs, because they're going to have their own Batman. They're going to have their own Superman, especially if you take a look at the last page. The Earth 2 Superman's hands coming right out of the ground. I mean, that was really cool, that last page, to start seeing, the dead. You see Aquaman's hand, you see his, you see the original Mirror Master in the background. I was looking through and trying to place who some of these were, but those were ones that stood out for me immediately. I'm like, wow, they're really like pulling, I'm guessing the original Mirror Master as well. I'm like, they're really pulling some, because that's going to be an interesting one for Barry to have some dealings with.
Ah, true.
And the Scar, it shows how out of touch the Guardians are. They're so busy making laws and trying to micromanage everybody that they're not watching what's going on in their own backyard. Scar's been doing this from Oa.
He's not even really hiding it. He's not even hiding it.
So, I mean, and they've provided the opportunity for this.
Yeah, these guys are not going to have a good day when this all wraps up. It cannot go well for them at all.
I am confused as can be. I am a Hawkman junkie. But I'm confused as can be. I saw him die. I feel like a hero who's in disbelief, like, no, I saw you die. You can't be alive. There's very few times in comics, I'm usually, it's okay, hero coming back and all that. It's great. It's comics. Anybody can do that. I'm actually a fan if there's a storytelling reason to bring back heroes. And when I say a storytelling reason, not for the quick shock value. I mean, like somebody's got a couple years worth of stories that they're going to tell with this character. Like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we do this with him and we bring him back? That's a great reason to bring back a dead character. Pull them off the shelf, bring them back, and use them. The quick shock to me never works for anything. So I'm never shocked by that. I'm shocked seeing Hawkman and Hawkgirl because I was pretty convinced they were dead.
Well, I wonder if this is with Hawkman and Hawkgirl. It looks like the ones that were alive previously, but it could be different. I guess the characters themselves, they come back so often that it's hard to tell.
In JLA, though, they did, in the JLA issue, was it 31? I'm sorry, whatever issue was the Final Crisis one, the one that kind of tied everything up. They alluded to the fact that Hawk Girl was tending her wounds from the Final Crisis, and she was picked up by Carter. So, I mean, I don't...
That ink metal is really strong, I gotta say.
I can't imagine that we aren't going to get an explanation, though, as far as what's going on with those two and how that happens. Well, the nth metal does offer a healing property for them and does offer some protection. So I guess it seemed like they intended, though, to kill the two of them, and that never happened. I don't get it. I admit, like, you know, I'm one to defend a whole bunch of stuff. This is one that I am completely baffled by. And it's funny how that one panel, I'm like, I loved it. Because first of all, the artwork's brilliant of them. They look great. I love seeing the atom on his shoulder. But I need to, please tell me what's going on with those two. Because I don't get it.
It seems like maybe they were going to kill them, then they thought better of it because they had an idea what they wanted to do with these guys and said, let's just not worry about it.
And I'm all for it. I have zero issue with any of that. And I'm always a big advocate for, you know, somebody's going to tell the story to straighten this out. I just want the story. I think once that happens, I'll be fine on it. It was really interesting. This Zero issue, though, I got to tell you, you know, it delivered a lot of bang. I loved the backup art by Doug Mahnke going through the various Lanterns cores, you know, seeing the Green Lanterns, the Red Lanterns, giving us kind of a layout as who's who in there.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
Because for someone who maybe isn't reading the core right now, is going to pick it up for Blackest Night, they pick up this issue, and they know everything they need to know going into it. They know who all the main characters are, and what the factions are, and what's going to happen. Like, they know everything they need to know before this thing starts. It's a brilliant idea, and it was free, so they know that, like, no one can be left behind by it.
The artwork was really sharp, though, because each Lantern Corps has an environment that's surrounding them that is very unique to who they are. So there was a different mood and tone to each page set as you were going through and taking a look at them. It was just and the inker and the colorist, they nailed this one. It was really interesting. And it was different inkers on a couple of them, and the colors changed as well, but they really did just a very nice job of capturing, for me, getting me excited. It was almost like the battle lines are being drawn. And to end with the Black Lantern Corps and leave us with that kind of cliffhanger, July 15th isn't going to come quick enough for me. I mean...
Oh, no. I'm waiting for this. This should be very, very good.
I'm a Batman nut, and I got to say, as excited as I am for June and all of the new Bat books and how that's all going to play out, I am equally excited, if not more, for what's going to be coming with Green Lantern, which is interesting considering how good I think that Bat stuff is right now. To say that this, just the way it's laid out and it represents the entire universe, and I think there really is going to be something for everybody. The Zero issue, I think, making it so character-driven, you could have just done some cheap previews and not given us a whole lot of depth. And I think we would have all gushed over that as well because give me some sketches and, honestly, sketch work. I've been following the various sketch work to this and to the Agent Orange saga and all that. I've been that, and the DC blogs had some interesting preview materials posted up. You know, I've been eating up all that stuff. So they didn't really need to go this route, and they still would have hooked me. But what adds more bang to it, to me, is that they didn't cheapen it. They gave us a depth-filled, character-driven story in there that I felt set the stage in such a way that I honestly feel I would have no problem handing this to somebody and saying, hey, if you're not reading comics right now, read this, and I think you might want to pick up this this story arc, because I just think it's that good.
I totally agree. And as an intro, I think it works even better because it doesn't spoil anything for what's coming up next.
No.
It works really, very brilliantly.
Yeah, it laid the groundwork. I saw you talking on the forums, as long as we'll kind of do a loose chat about this. Legion of Three Worlds, number 4, talking about another surprise.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go as in-depth on that because I'm going to try to edit the show together and put it out tonight. I want to talk about it, at least on some level, Connor Kent's return. I did. Did you see that coming? I mean, I knew from the Origins and Omens that they were hinting at it, but I didn't see it in this fashion. Did you?
I feel like I should have. Like, I feel like after reading it, I should have seen it coming, but I had no idea.
And I felt like that too. I totally agree with you. I'm like, how did I? It's kind of like, duh, but I didn't. And I'm going to totally admit I had. And if there's anybody out there listening to this that you like, are like, oh yeah, I clearly saw that this is going to happen. Amen to you, and kudos. I had no clue. I was totally thinking flashes, and that was the wonderful thing. It was a real great sleight of hand because they had me so focused on. I felt I was so smart because I knew Bart Allen was going to come back in this, and I was not shocked by that. I loved how they delivered it. The way that they delivered it and the way that they explained it, that Bart's return was because he lived when the Speed Force was yanked out of him. That was his essence being taken out of him. That provided the opportunity, and he had like this out-of-body experience. So I loved that explanation because I'm like, okay, considering the forces that are at work here and the understandings of the power of the Speed Force that they've already established, okay, that really works for me. I was glad that there was that explanation that all of that did happen, but so that was cool. But the Connor Kent thing, I'm like, I knew at the beginning of the issue when he started digging there, I'm like, oh man, he got a job in the cemetery to dig him up. What a cool way to bring him back, though, because I thought did you read the Origins and Omens where they alluded to his coming back?
Yes.
The Brainiac one? I thought he was going to be a Black Lantern in this.
Exactly. That's what I saw coming.
Yeah, so, I mean,
kudos to those guys.
Yeah.
I love surprises in my books, and not cheap ones. Like, I love genuine storytelling surprises when you see it come, and you don't see it coming at all, but it makes perfect sense. Like, it wasn't a red herring. It wasn't anything crazy. Like, that was thrown from left field. Like, it makes sense the way they did it, but it was still a complete surprise, at least to me, and I love that kind of stuff in my comics.
Now, here's my question, and it's something that has me curious. When is Legion of Three Worlds happening chronologically in relation to this? Because is it still possible to bring Connor Black as a Black Lantern?
I think it is.
Because of time. I don't know. The same thing we say about Bruce. Could it happen with Connor?
Now, I have a question about the last page. Mm-hmm. Is that Prime just 1,000 years older with the Time Trapper part? Like, I have no idea who that is.
Well, it's supposed to be Prime.
Okay, I thought so because of the scarring on the chest. I just wasn't sure.
Which, I mean, this is the first time that's ever been established. The origin of Time Trapper has, changed like multiple times. So, I mean, that was totally a new thing. I enjoyed it for shock value. I totally, obviously, because I'm like, well, I never in a million years considered Time Trapper to be Prime.
Right.
I'm curious to see how they explain that. That at this point is really interesting to me to see how they show us or explain to us that Prime wound up being Time Trapper.
Well, I think he punched the wall back in Infinite Crisis, and that's what happened. That's my answer for everything.
Everything is the wall punching.
Exactly.
I do like, though, the concept that he already knows that they didn't beat him. So, wow.
And I can't wait for that smirk to get wiped off his face when they actually do beat him. Like, that's what I want to see.
I wonder if he's going to be like the Bond villain and say too much.
Oh, I'm sure. Like, everything this character does is just, he whines. I love the character, personally. Mm-hmm. Like, he's a great character, but all the whining and all the complaining, like, good and well, he's going to give away something, or he's going to make a mistake in his hubris somewhere that's going to give it away for the good guys to come through and finally beat him.
Well, what makes him a good... I like him, too. I really do. And I think he's one of those, you got to be careful to use him sparingly and use him at the right times. But when he is used, you want to see him get beat up. And, I mean, that's a good villain. I mean, you do.
I hate him, so much. He's such a good bad guy.
Yeah. I mean, on no level, like, Clark wants to redeem it, and I'm kind of like, well, no, let's just beat him up.
Exactly.
I love you, Clark, and, go Superman and, save everybody, and I'm all for you. And I think it's I actually love that because it's a very consistent Superman approach that, like, this is the only way we can do it, we got to redeem him. But I'm like, redeem him, beat him up. school him, you know? I mean, that's then stick his statue back in the back corner again to further have him suffer that indignity. He got so ticked off by it, well, put it back further now. Yeah. Or put him in a dress or something. I don't know.
Put a tarp over it.
Yeah. That series, it was funny. I guess when you talk about like books that have been delayed and stuff like that, that totally didn't even enter into my mind at all. I picked it up immediately. I read it. I thoroughly got drawn right back into it. I loved the stuff with Sunboy. The build to him where he was in his head, you were hearing the reflection again of him talking about, I can't see myself putting the ring back on again and all that nonsense. And then all of a sudden you see the eyes light up. There's certain moments.
Scene.
Oh, yeah.
I missed out on the Legion story of Superman, though, because I had dropped the book whenever the Last Sun arc got delayed a while back. I've been going through and picking up things recently, and I completely missed the Legion arc. So this is my second Legion story ever. My first one was Supergirl, like 1,001 years later, and this one is my second story. So there's a lot of characters in this book. There's a lot of characters. I had to go back and reread 1 and 2 after 3 came out just to get reoriented with all of it.
I will say this. I think there is a benefit, and it's hard for me to because I read that story. I think this story really does delve nicely off of that. It is they released it as a hardcover.
I'm going to get that.
But they also released it as a trade. I think they just solicited it. So I don't think it's actually out yet as the trade, but it's coming out soon. So I think for people, looking for a budget way to grab it, you don't have to get the hardcover. You can also get the trade. Because I know they released Brainiac in a trade after the hardcover. So I know that they did solicit this again in a trade as well. So people can either grab the nice hardcover or the trade. It's well worth picking up if you're enjoying Legion of Three Worlds to pick up that Superman story, because it really is very much a prelude to this. And a lot of the status quo of the Legion that you're seeing right now is really gone into in depth in that particular volume. So it's a good primer for this story, I think. It definitely does pull in the Legion that you read in that Supergirl and the Legion. They are a part of this. They were pulled in as a part of this. So they are there as well. But it's definitely the Foundation Legion that we're seeing, the framework Legion that's been in this story, is the one that was showcased in that Superman and Legion of the Superheroes arc. So for anybody that, I don't think you have to read it, but
you don't.
But I think there is something, if you really liked it and you're like, well, I'd like to read more, I would recommend that, because it was a very good story, and it really does kind of paint a picture of how their world got to the way it is now. So it's kind of like what we're talking about, this being a zero issue. That's very much a zero arc to Legion of Three Worlds. And it is, like I said, trades, which, for anybody we're all, trying to be budget conscious now with the way the economy is so nuts and everything. You have two options. You have two options on that, and you really could go the trade route very easily. And it's a great story to pick up.
I'm going to get it.
Hole in a donut.
Joining us is a good friend of ours we met for the first time we met at the New York Comic-Con, Russell Burlingame. And he's from the comic-related website, and he has a number of columns over there. And Russ, welcome to Raging Bullets, because we've been talking about doing this since New York to talk about Booster Gold. But I was looking over the site, and besides Booster Gold, there are a number of columns that you have over there. You have a film-related one. You have one we were just talking before we started recording about Young Liars. And so you've got a number of things that are DC-related, but not just DC-related. You also have the Perhapsonauts that you're doing as well. So can you tell us a little bit, before we jump into the interview, about comic-related and some of the columns that you have over there?
Sure thing. Comic-related is, it's just like, Newsarama or Comic Book Resources, anything like that. It's a comics news and reviews website. And I had, about a year and a half ago, I guess now, it was February of 2008, I had somehow ended up in touch with Chuck Moore, who runs the site and has for years now. He was looking for contributors, and I looked at the site, and there was a really solid base there. There was a lot of really good, the HTML was good, and the approach was good and everything. The one thing that I thought they really needed was original content, because at that point, a lot of what was going on at Comic Related was comic book companies' press releases and kind of syndicated columns, even if you don't want to necessarily call them syndicated, but they would reprint like people's blogs and things like this, And so I said to Chuck when we were talking about me coming on board, I said, well, what if I do a couple of original pieces for you, and that way you have new content, and because the way the internet, of course, works is that if you have original content, you're going to show up much higher on search engines and all that kind of thing. Because if you're just duplicating other people's material, you're going to be the 10th person listed as opposed to the first one if somebody goes to search, a key phrase in your piece. And Chuck, of course, loved it. And so the first thing I did was I was working on a column called Conscientious Sequentials, which is politically and socially relevant comic books and graphic novels. And shortly thereafter, when Marvel killed Captain America, Newsarama had a column that was called Captain America is Dead, which then became Captain America is Still Dead, and then I think evolved one more time before it disappeared completely. And every month, they would sit down with Ed Brubaker, and they would talk about Captain America, what this issue meant for the overall series, and all this kind of thing. And I said, for people who are a big fan of that book, that's a real great treat. And so when Chuck asked me if I wanted to do the Hot Shot of the Week feature, which is like our pick of the week, the best book, on any given week, I said, yeah, sure, great. And on the 5th week, I found myself saying, gosh, every month when Booster comes out, I love that book. And so whenever Booster Gold comes out, I'm inclined to think it's the best book of the week. And so I just said to Chuck, how's this? We're going to accept Booster Gold from Hot Shot of the Week status. It's not going to be eligible. But the reason is, every time it comes out every month, I'm going to get Dan Jurgens on the phone. And in the beginning, we actually had Jeff Katz as well. And just talk about the book. And again, we talked in depth about the single issue, kind of go into, what the events of the book mean, not only in and of the issue itself, but kind of relative to the whole rest of the series and the continuity and the character's history and everything like that. And it's a little bit more in-depth than you usually get into a single issue. Because even if you get a fairly in-depth interview on a comic book news website, it's usually talking to the creator about their long-term plans or about the history of the book or about their love for the character. So 1,000 or more words on a monthly basis about a 22-page issue of a comic book is something that's, gives pretty decent coverage.
I love the name of the column, The Gold Exchange.
Yeah.
Just such a great title.
Something funny about that is I picked that just because I thought it was a clever pun. And when I said to Dan, like, this is what we're going to call it, Dan didn't say anything. And then recently, when I was going back through some old back issues of Booster Gold, the original Booster Gold comic from the 80s, at one point, their letter column was called The Gold Exchange.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
And so that wasn't some clever reference of mine, although it might have been subconscious. But it was just this neat thing where I'm looking through, and I think what happened is actually I think I Googled the Gold Exchange because I was looking for an old clip of mine, and I Googled the Gold Exchange, and it comes up an old letter column. Augie DeBleek or somebody had written a letter, and so it was reprinted on the internet. And so, sure enough, I pulled my old issues out of the box, and I looked, and I'm like, holy cow, the letter column was called The Gold Exchange, and nobody ever mentioned it. I don't know if Dan knew and didn't say anything, or if he'd forgotten after 20 years. But and that was kind of the standard bearer, too, in terms of the column name, because not only do I have a bunch of these, I guess we're calling them kind of creator commentary columns nowadays, because it's a lot like a director's commentary on a DVD. We used to call them post-mortem columns because that's kind of a journalism industry term, and that the first time I ever heard of these things was in reference to the Captain America one, and everybody called it a post-mortem. But for a fleeting moment, the Walking Dead column that I'm doing was going to be called post-mortem. So we decided to step gingerly away from that term when making a general reference because it could really confuse people.
Now, is the Walking Dead column up? Or is that coming?
The first one just went up.
Okay.
And it's actually I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said I was just going to call it post-mortem because it was a nice little in-joke for us at the site, and I couldn't think of a better pun. And my friend, whose name is Martin Kinney, he works at a comic book store in Oswego, New York. I forgot to credit him, so I'll do it here, and he'll be happy. But Martin said, "Well, you should just call it Talking Dead." And and I was like,
I like that.
I
Man.
do like that.
That's good.
So that was I abandoned calling it Postmortem in favor of calling it Talking Dead because I thought that it fit better with the clever puns. We've got Slings and Arrows is the one that Eric Ratcliffe does for Hawkeye and Mockingbird. I can't remember what the name of that series is. And then I have What's Per Happening.
It's Avengers Reunion.
Yeah, Avengers Reunion. And I have What's Per Happening is the Per Happenot series. Closing Arguments was when we were doing Manhunter because she's a lawyer. And that one actually will be coming back. I talked to Mark and Draco on Facebook
sweet.
the other day.
Nice.
And I said to him, because I'd been really... between the two of us, we're both a little bit flaky sometimes about getting back to one another. And so between the two of us, we missed a bunch of issues during the recent Manhunter relaunch. And I kind of accosted him when the first solicitation went up for the new series. And I said, hey, look, when Gotham City Streets comes out, let's promise each other that we'll just actually get this column going. Because... every month having one of these things, not only is it good content for me and it's great for the fans to be able to kind of follow it on a really close basis, but frankly, as far as creators are concerned, it's got to be kind of nice to know that you're always going to have one piece of pretty friendly, pretty in-depth coverage. And particularly when you have a book like Manhunter or a book like Young Liars where they're constantly on the bubble and you really could use all the readers you can get.
You guys have got a lot of content in your columns section. I mean, as far as a variety to it too. I see a Rebel one that's up there as well with Tony Bedard. I mean, this is a, and I mean, there's a great. I read The Darkness, and there's a great one up there about The Darkness. I'm just looking across. Why I love comics. It's a nice variety of columns and commentary. Which
we have a lot of contributors doing a lot of things. It's funny because Eric and I do so many of these creator commentaries where we just sit down with one guy, talk about one book. That as often as not, when I start talking to people about the content on the site and the columns page, I kind of get off on a tangent about these things because they're kind of sexy. They're Q&As. They have actual creators participating on a week-to-week basis, but. We have a lot of good columns that are, we have retailers who do columns talking about the economy of the industry and talking about what they see on, from behind the counter. Eric's Why I Love Comics and Behind the Eclipse, which are kind of review columns. One is about comics, obviously. The other's about heroes. And then even for me, I have To See or Not to See, which is my movie column. And I've been trying very, very hard lately. Anything that I didn't see when it was either in theaters or brand new, I've been trying to go back and do it, even if it's belated, just so that there's a searchable archive of comic-related reviews for things like, Wanted and The Hulk and whatever else.
Well, and it seems like every year there's another re-release of all the movies we've all already bought anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that I got to do soon is I got to start bothering people for the Blu Ray reissues of things. Mm-hmm. Because they're adding features to these things, and they're adding, documentaries and commentaries and things that weren't on the original discs. And I didn't own a Blu-ray player literally as recently as when Watchmen Tales of the Black Freighter came out and The Spirit came out right within a couple of weeks of each other. And they sent me Tales from the Black Freighter on Blu-ray, and so it took me forever to get a review written because I had to go buy the DVD. I had to, swap it out. And then with The Spirit, they sent me the DVD, but the Blu-ray has all the cool stuff on it. There's a documentary on Will Eisner that's not available on the DVD. And of course, now you got with the Wolverine movie hitting next week or whatever it is, they've got the X-Men trilogy has just been released on a giant Blu-ray, deluxe package. And so I got to start.
9-disc package, I think, is what it was when I was looking at that one.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, it reminds me of that fleeting moment in between The Matrix 2 and 3, when the Matrix trilogy was considered, Warner Brothers' most saleable franchise, and so they released that 6-disc or 8-disc or something box set that was the 2 movies that were available at the time and the Animatrix and all these extras and all this kind of craziness, and it came with a little bust and all this kind of thing. So we're seeing a lot more of that kind of really gratuitous re-releasing, I think.
And with
where
the digital copy too, usually being included now as a disc.
Oh yeah, that was one of the big gripes I actually had, and not to get too far afield here, but I guess this kind of pertains to DC because the comics being released by DC these days. But
Well, and comic films kind of relate to all comic fans anyway
Yeah.
because we all see them all. So
But the Spirit just absolutely maddened me because, they have the standard DVD and then they had the two-disc special edition. And the two-disc special edition is different from the standard edition only in that it has, at least from what I could tell reading the press materials, and I somebody could write me later and tell me I'm wrong, but only in that it has a digital copy. Because the one I got is a single disc with the movie and some features, and then all those features that do not exist on the second disc that are on the Blu Ray. The reason they don't exist on the second disc isn't because they ran out of space. It's because the second disc is only a digital copy and nothing else. And so to me, I kind of look at it and I'm like, this is a waste of a disc because you have to have the little paper code that's on the inside of the case anyway to use the digital copy. If you just included that so that they could go to iTunes or something,
right,
then you could not have that disc at all. And it's funny because I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, but I bought some DVDs recently, and all the DVDs at the moment, one of the major distribution houses must have gone to recycled plastic. And so they have like little recycled logos cut into the plastic of the DVD case behind the box art.
I saw that. Yeah,
and all I could think with this thing with the Spirit is whatever plastic you saved by cutting out the little recycled logo is now being wasted on this second disc that nobody needs.
right.
It's symbolism over substance, though, because
yeah.
we're going recycling. We're going green. No, you're not. Come on.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's face it, we can have a whole discussion about how that's politics in this country, but certainly that's the media in this country.
The disc could be used. The second disc could be used as a coaster because that's the funny thing. I remember the first time I didn't like my first time I got digital copy. I was like, oh, I'm excited because I've got an iPod, so this will be another video I can throw on there. I throw the disc in. It prompts me for the code. I enter the code, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's going to upload this from the disc. It isn't. The code pops open your iTunes for anybody that's never done this before, and it downloads it from iTunes. So the disc is useless.
The disc it's a little like 64 kilobyte auto run file, and all it does is prompt you for the code.
Right.
And so you're sitting here going, that could have fit on one of the old floppy disks from 100 years ago. The only reason it's on a DVD is because that's cheaper to make now.
I will say there's one thing that does irritate me though. Occasionally you'll get a disc that's only the Windows Media format, so you can't get the iTunes copy. And I'm like, can we just at least on the digital end of it have a standard like either include both or just pick one?
Well, it's kind of like the Blu-ray thing. Excuse me. It's kind of like the Blu-ray versus HD DVD thing.
Absolutely.
Where eventually that'll happen. Eventually the market will demand that a standard be established because the market simply won't abide identical copies of the same product to be out there and expecting for people to buy them all. But in the meantime, the people who have a vested interest in one or the other aren't going to back down until the market tells them they have to.
And it is weird that film seems to be one of those rare occasions where it seems like the competition almost keeps the prices higher because it hasn't hit that like heavy adoption rate yet where prices start to drop.
Right, exactly.
When the HD format kicked in, Blu-ray prices eventually, when it was selected that Blu-ray was going to be the one, the prices started to come down. And it really wasn't until then that we got drastic price drops.
Oh yeah, and even above and beyond that, I mean, think back 5-6 years ago now, because I managed a little mom and pop video store, and at the time when when VHS was in its final death throes, where distributors were no longer making most movies on VHS, and if you did want to buy it, it was a whole hassle and it was really expensive and all this kind of thing. During that time, that was around the same time when DVD had 90-something% market penetration, and all of a sudden you started for the first time seeing the $5 DVDs at Walmart that weren't generic old Fleischer cartoons from the 30s and public domain movies. They were actually films you'd want to watch.
Right.
And I think that sooner or later that's what's going to happen with Blu-ray as well, because the reality is as shelf space shrinks and real estate shrinks that you can dedicate to this product, you're going to have to put some of it up for sale just to get it the heck out of Walmart.
Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with DVD. Now you can get that. I will say that I do like the concept of including the digital copy because, like, the Wonder Woman DVD is a great example of this. I picked up the Blu Ray of that, and it was great to have the digital copy included because now I have it on my iPod. And I do think we're at a point right now with what we're paying for the film that legally give us the right to our legal digital download for purchasing it. And, that we keep it legal. We've got, straight through iTunes. We've got our legal copies or, whatever format, ends up being the dominant one. If it's Windows Media, fine. But I can't imagine that being the case with the iPod penetration right now.
Right, absolutely.
But I mean, it's great to have that included. And I think that should be the standard right now is to have that included.
I agree, and I do see it kind of moving that way. And I felt the same way about, again, Tales from the Black Freighter. Mm-hmm. The idea of a digital copy with something like that, you're like, it's a half an hour long movie. So even if you're like me and you have kind of a smaller iPod where I don't have like the 250 gigabyte, I have a little Nano. But even if you're like me and you have a fairly small iPod, I can still drop that on there and watch it every so often if I'm so inclined because it's a short film. And also that for me as a reporter, it meant that I was able to, once I acquired a copy that I could use, I could watch the digital copy on the subway on my way back home.
Right.
So that way I could review it.
The sad thing is, I don't own a Blu-ray yet, and I don't own an iPod. I think I'm the last person in the free world that doesn't own an iPod.
I love that you podcast and you don't own an iPod.
I know. What I do is I download all the shows to my computer and I punch it up and I listen to it that way. But I'm a podcaster and I don't own an iPod.
If it makes you feel any better, I don't actually own a Blu-ray player. My brother has one of the gaming consoles, and so I can kind of pirate his every so often when he's not around or whatever. But additionally, I didn't own an iPod until Christmas, and my previous MP3 player had disappeared into the ether, which is what happens in my office a lot of the time. And my girlfriend at the time bought me an iPod because she was very, very generous, and she was trying to figure out something that I didn't already have, and that was important enough that I wouldn't lose it because she knows that I lose everyththis.
Guys, why don't we go ahead and jump into a discussion about Booster?
Okay.
And
one of my favorite topics, I will say.
Yeah. This was great because you had mentioned that you had such contact with the writer, and we got to chatting about that. And, I started reading the column and started realizing that I'm like, wow, there really is a deep joy for Booster Gold. So it seemed like a natural transition to do this segment over it. So I'm glad we finally got to pull it together.
Okay. It's great. Not only is it, sorry to interrupt, but I will say not only is it a deep joy in Booster because I love the character and I've loved the book since it was relaunched, but it goes back years and years to when I was an intern at Wizard in 1999, and the very first interview I ever had to do was with Dan Jurgens over the Titans Legion crossover he did with Phil Jimenez. I was on the phone with him for Lord knows how long, mostly just babbling. And at the end of it, he said something nice about me to my editor shortly thereafter. And ever since then, it's been like that was my first gig that I ever did, and I was terrified because Dan was like my hero growing up. I was a big Superman reader, and the fact that he said something nice to my editor, and then I interviewed him 2 or 3 more times while I was still at Wizard, had made it so he was the first friend I ever made in the comics industry.
What was funny, right around that Death and Returns of Superman time was, shortly before that, I got heavily into Superman again. And I have these spells where, I kind of run hot and cold on soups. And I remember the one thing that captivated me the most was the artwork that he was doing with that and just how good it was and what a great looking book it was, but also that he was writing along with doing that. And I'm always very impressed with writer-artists that are able to keep that schedule because that has to be insane because his artwork is always very detailed. I always like his character structure. There's a definite style that he has that you can tell his work right away. And it's one of the great things about Booster, seeing him do the artwork on Booster now. I'm like, I don't know how this guy is doing this and getting sleep.
And particularly when you look back, it's funny because you can really trace the evolution of Booster and also of Dan by just looking at Booster Gold over the years, because Dan is obviously the writer and the artist on the first Booster Gold series. He created the character. And when Keith Giffen and John Mark DeMatteis left the Justice League, Dan was one of the first guys to work on the Justice League after them. He was writing and drawing. If you remember, he was actually, at the same time that he was doing Superman during the death, he was writing and drawing both the Superman Monthly and Justice League of America. Which to me is just an incredible schedule to keep, especially for books that absolutely must always be on time. But Booster and Beetle were obviously a big part of that team too. And then when Booster came back into publication again, it's literally there's been in all of history, 2 issues. It was that 2-issue fill-in arc by Rick Remender and Pat Olaf. Other than that, every solo Booster story has been a Dan Jurgens story in terms of art. He's been the guy to draw that character when there's a solo story. And I could be wrong. There could be some JLI story that revolves around just him that I'm missing. But, a solo story that actually has Booster Gold written on the cover in any way, including like the old Secret Origins features Booster Gold thing. Dan did that one too. That's in the Showcase Presents special that DC did a couple of months ago.
And, one of the things that I really liked about this series as it's progressed, we're into issue 19 now.
Which is actually issue 21, because they had 0 and a million.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So out of those 21 issues, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this particular book has been the growth and development of this character. This is really a character that has evolved. In these 21 issues, he's evolved a lot. But, I mean, if you go back to things like 52, to his own solo series, back to JLI and all that, he's a character that really... If you look back at his starting point to where he's at today and actually follow that whole journey of this character, a very interesting character study of a character who's very human and very accessible. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about him is you feel like you could be Booster.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The funny thing, too, is that when you look at the most recent story arc that just ended, the Reality Lost, the last 2 parts of the story were him teaming up with himself from a year ago. Because he, during the course of the time travel, he ended up meeting the Booster Gold from, I think it was Booster Gold number 6 or 7, and teaming up with himself. And the Booster Gold from, really just a year ago, 2 or 3 missions ago in his time, was much more impetuous and much more kind of silly and flippant about time travel and all that kind of thing than the Booster who's the main character of our story at this point. He said, hey, let's go forward 50 years in the future and see, whatever happens to us if we're still getting laid at 80.
You don't really want to see that, do you?
Yeah. Well, actually, and just for old JLI fans and for people who read the OMAC project and some things like that, the question that Dan raised, which I think is a really interesting one to explore, which is not in the script, it was just in my column this week, or actually the podcast that he and I did together, was the way he phrased that question was, let's go 50 years in the future and see if we ever did hook up with fire. Which to me was that's a story beat that's been largely forgotten, even by me and by a lot of the fans. I think that Booster and Fire were starting to get to the point where they were actually developing a relationship immediately prior to 52 and all the changes that came for Booster during that time. And so it's interesting to me that Dan kind of brought that up out of thin air, unprompted, and it suggests to me, without any foreknowledge that this is actually true, but just suggests to me that could be a story beat we see being elaborated on in the next few months to a year.
Yeah, the thing I really digged about this this whole story arc, was one, we really saw Booster by himself, because this story arc basically started off with Rip Hunter disappearing and they don't know where he is, and Booster's got to fix the timeline, and he's operating on his own, and it's it's kind of funny we talk about how he met his past version a year ago, which is the fundamental law of time travel. Not only do you not meet your person, from the past, you don't want any interaction. He's recruiting him to say, "Come on, I need your help to fix the timeline." So I was kind of just like, "Oh my God, this is massive." Build, one time problem on top of another. But that is Booster Gold, though. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't know exactly how to do it, but he's going to improvise, adapt. He's zigging and zagging, and that's something I really just that that personality that, as we say, you could be, Booster Gold. You could hang with him and have fun with this guy. He is a very, approachable superhero that, it's something that I've really enjoyed seeing over these issues. It started with 52. Just, that was my real introduction to Booster was 52. And then into the solo stuff is just like, I'm seeing the growth and evolution of a hero here. And I'm really just enjoying the ride.
I was just going to say, and for me as a reader, to kind of concur with that, one of the things that I really loved, because just the way it was written by both Jeff and then Dan, was, kind of chokes you up a little bit. The relationship with him and Ted and the way that it's being handled and the way it's being written. When you talk about Booster being approachable and somebody you could hang with, there's something really noble and really just enjoyable to read about the fact that, he can have pretty much anything he wants in the universe because he's out there messing with time and all kinds of things. And Rip Hunter has gone back and he has, classic Coke from the 50s and all the Marquis de Sade's weapons and all these cool things in his lab. And when Booster's saying, like, you need me? You're going to have to give me something. And the answer is Ted. And to me, there's something just really, really human about that and really likable and approachable about that aspect of the character. Booster's... his first concern all through this monthly has been Ted and Michelle and the people around him and the fact that he's let these people down so many times over the years and he's trying to make up for that.
It's not about being filthy rich. It's not about it does show the maturity and growth of this character. It's not about the fame and the fortune or any of that anymore. It really is about trying to be a better person. And it's funny on the surface level. It's really about, who wouldn't if their best friend was taken away from them and they had the opportunity? Who wouldn't not only be tempted by that, but who wouldn't be swayed to the side where you would actually do what he did? And how hard would it be then to have to make the decision to say, is this the right thing? Is it not? And then to have your friend tell you, that moment with him and Ted and how it has played now into this arc. That's what I love about it. This arc so totally feels like it's spun right off of there, that this is a character who's been through that. You see the change in him, and especially dramatic, like we're saying here, with the fact that we've got Booster from 1 year ago, face-to-face with him. It's almost like we're being... I don't know, I would not want to be hanging with myself from a year ago. For much of the same reason, because we do all gain experience through life. And, if you look back at a year ago, I did dumb things a year ago that I would never want to repeat. And to see myself and be able to... And you would be tempted, I think, to feed yourself information to better yourself, to change your situation or your condition. And I loved the moments where he had to pull himself back and say, I can't do this. You can't know this. You can't ask me this. Even when it came to Michelle, he had to watch what he said. I loved that.
Well, and I think, too, that, again, coming back to Ted, the Ted Cord dynamic, I think one of the defining moments of kind of the relationship between Booster and younger Booster was where, the younger Booster, who's got kind of at that point in his character a very single-minded drive, says to our Booster, oh, this is great because now I know how everything turns out because there's no way you'd still be doing this in a year if Ted wasn't back. And Booster has to kind of pull himself off of that cliff and not jump into that conversation because of, the mess that you can make just by broaching a subject like that. And he's so much more able to deal with that now, whereas, at the time, right after the Batgirl issue, for example, where Rip was trying to tell him, look, I'm sorry, I want to do this as much as you do, but it's just not possible. Booster was just not at all ready to hear it. And he had to kind of stop for a second and realize that, the guy he's talking to is the same guy who, isn't ready to hear it yet because literally he just heard it a couple days ago in his time and rejected it.
I also like, too, though, that he also had to, the current Booster, had to, in his own mind, get comfortable with the fact that he's done something for Ted. Yes, our actions here ensured the existence of Blue Beetle. It's almost like he had to find some comfort in that I've done something for Ted throughout all this, even though it wasn't what my original goal was. I have put something in place that will ensure that I'll even meet the guy.
But the cool thing was the very next line after he says, yes, my actions ensure the existence of Blue Beetle, he goes, but my actions in World War II ensure the existence of Max Lord.
World War One.
What'd I say?
World War Two.
Oh, World War One, World War Two. It's the same thing.
Well, I know
isn't
the reason
it?
why is the Enemy Ace story was so good though that I mean that one is I really enjoyed the Enemy Ace story.
Yeah, I'm reading and I misread.
I love the fact that Dan comes from a time, because he was a superstar in the 90s. And he comes from a time when they used to have these things all the darn time. You always used to have to just write a page or two in to accommodate Day of Judgment or whatever crazy fifth week event they were doing or whatever. So I feel like Dan is much more comfortable in that zone than a lot of writers out there right now. And that's not to say that, that the Faces of Evil stories weren't good. But I did feel like the Enemy Ace story felt a lot less forced and a lot more organic to what was actually happening in Booster Gold than a lot of the other Faces of Evil stories when that event happened. And again, I feel like it speaks well of the book, it speaks well of the creator, and it kind of brings a question of the way that these events are being done nowadays. Like, how much does it feel to these poor writers like they're being led by the seat of their pants into this kind of story? Because I feel like a lot of these younger writers who didn't do this in the 1990s just aren't familiar with like the conventions of how to do this without completely derailing what you've got going on in your own book.
And that is the tricky balance, because I think a lot of times that's where fans will get upset, is they'll see a storyline they're enjoying derailed. And I do think you're right. I think it is a maturity that a writer gets where they recognize how to, when you're working within a continuity framework like this, fit in the event without losing the key core of what you're doing. And I do think one of the good things about Dan is he recognized here, I've got a time travel book. This is a great opportunity to take my readers to a different time and to tell a story of a time frame that's cool and interesting, while at the same time forwarding what I'm doing with Booster. Because I was a big fan of Enemy Ace. I loved the war stories, and he nailed that in such a cool way. And the elements where he played with the fact that Booster's powers, his suit wasn't working right, and Booster had to really kind of step up in that story as well. It really was a great example of how you can use an event like that to further character development.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I felt like too, just touching down on the idea that his costume keeps shorting out in that story. I felt like it was reminiscent of a lot of the old like Alan Moore or even Jerry Jones stories in Green Lantern, where like constantly there were people who were having to do everything without a ring, And there's a lot of similarities to that kind of old story, and those were always great character stories, because there's this notion that like if Hal Jordan has essentially godlike powers because he has this magical thing that can do whatever he wants and whatever he imagines, then what is it that makes him relevant as a character? Because it's not that he can just make a big boxing glove appear out of nowhere. That's what makes him visually interesting for the cover of a comic book. But what makes him interesting as a character, and what makes Booster Gold interesting as a character, is that when you take all his toys away from him, he's still going to find a way around that. And he's still going to find a way to do the right thing and to get him and his friends out of the scrape, or whatever you want to say, with or without a power ring or a magic suit from the future.
I think writers that are able to do that can tear down a hero, because Superman's got the same problem.
Oh, yeah.
And I shouldn't say it's a problem, because I think writers that are able to strip him away and get to the root of the character without the powers are able to keep that feeling, that emotion, when you do great stories of him with the powers. I think there's ways to do that. It's one of the cool things about writers that I think with Hal's a great example of that too. Once you get to the human side and that human core and that human root of the character, you can keep bringing those elements into the character when they're operating at full thrusters. And Booster, we see the same thing with Booster. When his costume's working great and we see him in the time spear, we still get those hoorah moments because we actually care about the guy because we've seen him at his hardest.
I think a great example of that actually is Kingdom Come. You were saying it's sometimes difficult to do that with Superman because he's just so powerful and because he's so perfect all the time. And I think Kingdom Come is kind of the example of what kind of tells me that, you can tear down a character, and the fact that Superman, for I'd say the broad majority of Kingdom Come, even when he's in costume, doesn't appear using his powers. He's usually sitting around a room telling people what to do or considering the situation. And so whenever he actually does like go out in public and wear the costume and do good deeds, it's kind of like you get a little cheer in the back of your throat, because it's like, hey, okay, he's found his direction, he knows what he's doing, and here we go.
You get the dun-da-da moment when you see him. Every single time I see anytime artwork where Superman's opening up his shirt and you see the S underneath it, I still get that, yeah, kind of moments that, from childhood and whatnot.
Yeah, it's actually my... It's funny because I was never a huge fan of the Wolfman Byrne era on Superman. I enjoyed parts of it, but... to be honest with you, I really didn't get into the character until after those guys had walked off, and you got, Dan Jurgens and Roger Stern and Louise Simonson and those guys. But I still think, as a Superman reader, the most enduring cover of my lifetime, with the possible exception of Superman 75 with the torn cape, has got to be John Byrne's Man of Steel #1, because it's such an iconic image, and in the case of that cover, it's delivered so well and with such a minimum of noise, I guess. Because it's literally just him pulling the shirt open. You don't even see the face, and so you don't really think about the fact that it's like the John Byrne version of Superman that just got retconned into existence at that time. It's just the most iconic representation of the character. It's kind of, if you ever read the interviews with Brad Meltzer and Rags Morales, what they were going for in Identity Crisis, where they had all those panels of people with just the logos,
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it's one of those things that just launches you back into childhood, or just it unleashes just the emotion you want to read through. I don't know. It's hard for me to even explain sometimes, because it's just a raw emotional feeling, and when a comic can bring that out of me, that is something that I cheer and just revel in, because one of the earlier arcs, issues in this arc, had a moment that took me back to a huge emotional spin, and it was only a couple pages and a couple panels. It was when Booster was dealing with Ralph, and Ralph was asking him about Sue, and you see him just like, how do I handle this? And he basically tells Ralph, you guys are going to be happy together. You'll be happy while you're together, because he doesn't want to say you'll be happy together for the rest of your life. Well, Ralph kind of takes it that way, and we see that flash forward to Identity Crisis, where Ralph is attacking Booster, saying, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me?" And I remember that moment when I read that issue, and I just like, oh, you're from the future, Booster. Oh, and it was just a tie-in to a couple years ago story in a present-day Booster Gold issue. And it was just like, it's stuff like that that really gets me into Booster and really has me, gushing about this guy.
I do like the fact that Skeets can zap people, though, because it provides the opportunity that you can really go to any era, and you don't have to worry about it necessarily tying directly into continuity, though, which is a good move as well, because you can have those moments where you're right, and I'm totally agreeing with you, it ties directly into that, and it works really well. But by the fact that you can zap characters and like, he did it with himself, obviously, in this arc, you can tell any story, because there's a lot of eras I want to see Booster go to. I want to see original stuff, but I also want to see him hit the classic. I want to see him hit really obscure things. I like the fact that this book can go anywhere right now, and and there is that storytelling, just a little tweak, and it's a nice way out to say, okay, you want to see What If? Here's What If Booster were here.
Absolutely, and I really, I'm looking forward to the stories that Dan's got planned for the next little while. We kind of touched on them when he and I talked at the New York Comic Con. There's going to be a story that visits the death and return of Superman. There's going to be a story where he interacts with all the old Marv Wolfman Titans in that time period, not in the current Judd Winnick like Titans where they're all grown up and have angst. But there's I think it's actually the upcoming arc. He's seeing the Titans and Deathstroke and I think Vigilante maybe back in the 80s. And it's one of those things where it's really fun to be able to look back at these things And like you said, it's a nice kind of Deus Ex Machina to be able to say that, hey, Booster was instrumental in saving a bunch of people's lives this day, and they don't necessarily, they aren't going to necessarily remember him the first time they see him on the news. Because obviously one of the fundamental problems of Booster being very heroic in the past is that people, when they first saw him in the 80s, said, oh my God, what a prick, he's trying to make money off of this. And so if he's already got, at that point, 10 or 15 documented incidents of genuine nobility, then it starts to bring up the question of, like, okay, well, how come Superman, who is a generally trusting guy, was so cold to him in his first appearance? You know what I mean? And so I think that it's nice to have a device like that written into the narrative where you can just say, okay, let's not worry about that, and let's worry instead about telling the best possible story in this time period.
And if you have a story with a character that you want to tell where you can add something or add a neat little twist to something classic that happened, or even to an era. Forget, it doesn't have to necessarily be an event that has been documented. You can go either route. It's really great because it gives Dan the freedom to really play around with any DC Universe character that he wants to in this book, and I love that because in a certain way, this has become, when necessary or when it fits the story, a great opportunity for Booster to team up with just about anybody, and really that's what we all want to see. I want to see those moments.
And it's funny because looking at Brave and the Bold, and this is no reflection on the creative teams who've been part of it or anything, but by and large, I haven't been thrilled by the book. There have been some really strong stories told there, and there have been a couple of issues that were just standout. It's not on my pull list. I pick it up on a month-to-month basis depending on how good it looks and what the current story is, And that's just my personal taste. I've never been a huge fan of, like, that obligatory team-up book. But Booster has this nice dynamic where it's a character I like, it's a character I care about. He usually is teaming up with somebody. But if the story doesn't merit it, and if there isn't a good team-up story to be told this month, there's no compulsion to just grab a couple of guys and throw them in the same room together.
Brave and the Bold's a great example of that, too, though, where, like you were saying, you really can pick that up on an arc-by-arc basis because the creative team drastically changes. So you can really look and say, wow, this creative team looks like they're really doing something interesting with that book, and you can pick up an arc. Guys, one of the characters I want to talk about is Michelle, because it was funny, and this is no insult to the book. I was so into the idea of Ted possibly returning because I was liking their team up that when it was like Michelle was kind of brought in there as kind of Rip's way to say, hey, look, here's something I was able to do for you. I was kind of like, but I wanted Ted. But here, this issue is a great example of and where her story went. I enjoyed her every issue that she's been in, but this issue 19 was a pivotal issue for me because it really started to have her confront an honest-to-goodness, harsh reality. How would you feel if you found out, I've been brought back, I'm alive, and I'm not supposed to be, and all these things happened. My brother had this whole life around that, and I'm not supposed to be here. Or am I supposed to be here? And where do I fit? It would be an interesting, at this point, when you're time traveling and you don't have necessarily a stable base of operations, feeling like you belong somewhere has got to be an issue that would show up at some point in time. What is your sense of home? Where is that? But then to realize that you're not supposed to exist, period. Or even questioning that. Let's say, because I do believe Rip wouldn't have yanked her out unless there's a genuine reason that she would, it's okay for her to be there. So, because we know how strict Rip is. But one of the interesting things about this is she's faced with the possibility, like, what if Rip's wrong? She has to question her own existence. It's a very deep sequence where I really felt like through this whole sequence of events that Michelle was just such an incredibly interesting character because of this. And the writing on her, I'm like, oh, I so totally get why they brought her back. I'm a Michelle believer.
And the funny thing is too that in the original series from the 80s, because I just reread it because I really am this guy. I really do enjoy Booster Gold that much. But I just reread it again. One of the things you see with Michelle, she's much, much more mature than Michael Booster. And she is kind of by default the big sister, even though they're twins. Michelle, throughout the course of that first series, I actually remember the first time I read it, thinking that in terms of being like a superhero that you can look up to, she fit the mold better than Booster did. It's just that she wasn't the main character. And her death was a really galvanizing event in that series, in the sense that when she died, Booster grew up a lot. And, part of that was because the book was coming to a close, it was being canceled, and they needed to give resolution to some dangling plot threads. But over the years, a lot's been made from that story. And so I think, when we talk about the maturity that Booster has achieved over the years and the ways that the character has evolved, so much of that comes from the fact that Michelle is dead. And so looking at Booster's life, as opposed to just, looking at the world or looking at, something else like this, looking at Booster's life since she died is probably the worst thing she could do, because she's got to look at that and say, like, the world's a better place because I was gone.
Yeah, and also realizing that this huge event was something that they felt she shouldn't know or didn't need to know necessarily, or it might be dangerous for her to know. I liked that there was a certain amount of, and this isn't a knock on her as a character, I think it's a very human response, there's a certain amount of surface level paranoia that you're like, who do I trust now? What is true? And I liked that. It was a very real moment, because up until this particular moment, she's just accepted. And now she has to really evaluate that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, like, the 80s sitcoms, there's always a conflict because somebody doesn't tell somebody something and they make an assumption. And it's similar stuff with her, where when they first brought her back, had they told there been 100% disclosure, would we have this type of anger? Because part of her anger is from this lost, that she doesn't know where she belongs, but part of it is because they didn't tell her. And she had to find out through the bad guy, who takes her to, this time portal that they're like, hey, here's the truth, honey. Your friends, people who love and who care about you, didn't want you to know the truth. And I think that is like the final catalyst that, sends her over the edge, where she's like lashing out against Skeets, and she's just lost and angry, and just there's a fury and a rage in her that has me wondering, did we just see the birth of a future Booster Gold villain?
And that's certainly an interesting question when you consider that it's coming from Dan, because during the original Booster Gold series, we saw kind of the early stages of what would later become the Armageddon 2001 story with Monarch, because Hawk, after the death of Dove, showed up in the Booster Gold series in the 80s working for the bad guys. And, he was kind of being duped into working for the bad guys because their politics were in line with his. But it was very much a story where he was clearly a bad guy who figured out at the last minute, wait a second, this isn't the right thing to do, and changed his mind. And so the idea that later on, not only did he become a bad guy, but he became a bad guy in big dramatic fashion in a book or in a story that Dan wrote, really does kind of bring into question, like, a sequence like that and that kind of anger and turning on Skeets. You're right, kind of like what is in store for her.
But I really liked the art sequence leading up to this, because they had that one real close-up of her. They show her face, and then they show the one tear running down. And then after that, the artwork just starts getting darker and darker. The background kind of like slowly disappears, and even there's some shading where you don't even see her eyes. Yeah, and it's just shadowing like the shadowing over her face, and it starts slowly getting darker and darker up until the final sequence where we have her at there, where we know she steps into that portal, into the unknown.
But when we see her eyes again, there's a very different look on her face, because she went from that sorrow to then you have the shadow over her face to then just a deep-rooted anger and lashing out and rage that you see very visible in her facial feature. And I'm a big fan of using the face as a storytelling tool, because that's where we're so used to conveying our emotions through that. But you also see it in the way her body's carrying itself, and there's just a total different, the fists being clenched when she's in the darkness, leading to this lashing out where she blasts Skeets with the magnetism. It just very different emotional ranges to sadness again. She's back into sadness again. So you don't know emotionally. She's unstable at this point, which anyone would be in her shoes. I'm very torn because, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see her face Booster. I can't imagine it being that simple in the sense that I think we're going to see a lot from this character that, sure, I could see her doing things that would be considered a villain role, but I think we're also going to see other things from her. I think she's just going to be an interesting character to watch.
Well, I think, too, that a lot of these characters, and again, kind of using Dan's previous work as a standard by which to judge, some of these things, oftentimes you see characters who are not really traditionally speaking villains. I mean, Dan was the one who took Parallax from being the guy who killed all the Green Lanterns and sucked up the battery to kind of adding that extra layer of, okay, here's what he's trying to do. Granted, he's a lunatic and he's killing lots and lots of people to do it, but in the grand scheme of things, he wants to eliminate evil from the universe. And so Hal, through the way Dan was telling the Zero Hour story, was not entirely a villain in the traditional sense. And I really can't imagine that we're ever going to see, Michelle, kind of metaphorically speaking, sitting in a corner twirling her mustache. She's just not the kind of character who lends herself to becoming genuinely evil, no matter how slighted she feels.
Parallax was a great example, too, of where the intention on the surface was very noble. It was the methodology.
Yeah.
And that's what I see being much, much more likely with Michelle than any kind of, Lex Luthor, Machiavellian, I'm going to go back in time and mess with things kind of villain, is I could see her trying to do things to a particular end and trying to do things, in a heroic fashion or in a meaningful fashion, becoming misguided because she doesn't understand everything that Rip understands.
And maybe stopping them or stopping others or whoever from being, because right now she feels like people are being a puppet master to her, where they're kind of controlling her situation, deciding what she needs to know, what she doesn't need to know, bringing her back, but then kind of keeping her under a short leash. I wonder if she is going to prevent that type of thing when she perceives it as being that way from happening. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of ways. That's what I really like about this moment is I'm not particularly sold on one direction for her. I'm seeing a wealth of possibilities here.
I'm intrigued, actually, to see if and how she ends up interacting with Ted. Because one of the things that, this has been the source of much confusion because of comic book convention conversations and things of this nature. But one of the things about Ted is we don't actually know, as much as we'd like to think that we do, what happened at the end of the Blue and the Gold. Because Ted steps into the time machine with the spoken intent that he's going to go back and sacrifice himself, or the implied intent, let me say, that he's going to go back and sacrifice himself. And then at the end of the story, you see the shadowy figure say, Bwahaha, who turns out not to have been Ted, but in fact to have been the villain from Reality Lost. But more than that, you have, the conversation that I had with Dan, it was either this month or last month when we were talking about this idea that Rex Hunter was in fact the shadowy figure in Ted's lab. And Jeff Katz had said at a comic book convention, no, that's Ted Cord. When I asked Dan, so what's going on? Does your story not jive with what you guys talked about, or did you change your mind or something? And Dan's response was, I'm surprised Jeff would say that. We all sat around when they were leaving the book, and we know what happened to Ted. It's not something that any of us are going to stand up and give away to you just yet. And so, to me, it would be interesting to see, because obviously Ted, to a certain extent, was being played with in much the same way during Blue and Gold. He was being used as bait, and his fate was being determined by, Rip and by Booster and by the bad guys. And I feel like that could be an interesting direction for Michelle to go in as well, because obviously she could feel some kinship with him, because those two were the precondition that Booster used to start working for Rip.
It is really interesting because this book, and I love that in Framed and all this, you've got this very deep, section where it's an emotionally stirring section, but then you go back to pure adventure story, which is one of the great things about this book is you're left, like you said, you've got this big overhanging thing with Ted Cord, and where, when is he going to appear again, or when are we going to find out his final fate and what happened there? And we've got Michelle, with this highly emotional moment that makes you wonder, is Michelle good, bad, somewhere in the middle? You know, what state is she in as we're leaving her at the moment? But then you go back to this knife story where it's pure, all-out adventure. It's pulpy adventure. And I mean that in nothing but a compliment, where I'm saying you've got this bright figure, and Booster is one of those characters that there's moments where Booster just looks darn cool. And these moments where he's having spears thrown at him, would it help if I threw in a few oil changes, a weekly wash and wax? And he's got natives throwing, it felt like very Indiana Jones. And it's one of the cool things about this character is that he seems to fit in every environment when he really shouldn't, because he definitely looks out of place in this environment, but yet you can't help as a reader say, this fits Booster. It totally fits Booster that he's there. And it's, I don't know if I'm even explaining myself right in that sense. I mean, that's really one of the things that I think is the charm of this book, is that he just seems to belong, his stories seem to belong in any era.
It's also like the blending of comedy and serious moments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have the very dramatic, scenes with Michelle where she's, stepping into the light. Then you go to Booster having like a little bit of fun. But even between the two Boosters, you see it starts to get a little serious between them, where the younger one is like, hey, this is a cool thing you're doing. He's kind of there's some respect for, for the older Booster, seeing what he's going to become. He's like, is this hard? Is this stuff kind of, tough to be this way? And he's like, it even impresses the young Booster. And you have this moment of seriousness between the two of them, which you can tell they cut the tension with a joke about, hey, why don't we tell Wonder Woman so she doesn't think I'm such a jerk? He's like, I don't know about Wonder Woman. Hey, what about Black Canary? Yeah. And you see them just that little banter back and forth about, Black Canary and Wonder Woman. It's that blend and that kind of, meshing of the comedy and the serious, going back and forth. Not too much of one to, not too much comedy to throw off the serious nature of the title, but enough to give it that every man feel to it.
I also think, too, when you talk about him fitting into every kind of situation and fitting into every era, not only does it help that, he can be lighthearted, he can be serious, he can be saving the multiverse, or he can be buying the living island. But you also have this one very, very minor tweak to the character that was made, in 52, or shortly before, and I guess it was the Infinite Crisis, was removing the collar. And I feel like if you really look at Booster's, just the look of his costume, as he's become much more in tune with time travel, removing the collar kind of undates. It was very much a 70s, 80s kind of look. And now when you look at him, you look at old, Steve Ditko designs from the 60s. You look at like Spider-Man and Hal Jordan and things like this, these characters who were very specific to that time. And if you take away the fact that like it's got modern day coloring and all the metal the metal effects, Booster's costume is really a very traditional superhero costume. Sure. And then when you look at him in the 1990s and you look at the fact that he does have all the shiny metal effects and he's got cool little gizmos and all this he has this look that somehow or other, it's simple enough, but it's got enough stuff going on that it really does seem to fit in with just about any era of superhero costume design. And so whenever he's traveling around through time, the only thing he really has to worry about is that nobody remembers he's Booster Gold.
I love that was like kind of a tactful way of saying that 90s was the accessories era. Because it's true. It's honestly true, though. And it's funny, I was looking at the costume while you were saying that. And that is so true about this costume, that it really does fit the classic superhero feel, but yet if you were a hero now, you'd want to put it on. And you wouldn't feel like dork, you wouldn't feel like, geez, I'm so out of date or anything. I think there's a reason why some of these iconic costumes keep coming back. And when they keep coming, like they'll do tweaks and changes to a hero's costume. But ultimately, if they go too far with it, they do pull back and go straight to their iconic roots for a reason. And I think that there's a point there to be made when you're saying it's iconic today. And I agree with you on that. That's one of the things that works about his suit.
And it's funny, you can look at, the example that I used because it was on the top of my head was Hal Jordan. But when you look at Kyle's costume from the 90s, like it was popular and really cool looking at the time, and Darryl Banks, God bless him, pulled off that look for a long time, and it didn't seem ridiculous. But when you start going to other artists who aren't as comfortable with the look, and when you start getting people who are taking too many liberties so it doesn't look like what it was intended to anymore, and all the kind of things that happen when more than one artist is involved with a character. And furthermore, when you get farther and farther away from that moment in time and it's no longer new and cool and it's now just the costume, they realized pretty quickly that they'd gone too far with it. And, aside from the obvious silliness of removing all the green from a character called Green Lantern, you then had to kind of go back and say, okay, how can we make Kyle definitively his own character without completely sacrificing, the iconic look of the Green Lantern character and the fact that this is one of those costumes that still doesn't look hokey,
And while keeping in there, though, you're right, because I remember when Kyle's costume first hit, I'm with you. I thought Darryl Banks made that in that era, it was a very believable costume. I really liked it. It made sense then. But how do you at the same time give a nod to the fact that this was the guy who had that outfit? And they've done a great job of evolving it back to something where it feels very much like it belongs in the Green Lantern books today and with the core, but it's still got a little bit of a nod to its history as well.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the new look of Kyle's costume, the post-countdown look or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I felt for that poor character because I'm a Hal Jordan guy in spite of having grown up in the Kyle Rayner era. But I like Kyle as a character. I'm not like a member of Heat or anything. I think that they both have strong and weak points and that both characters have something to add to the franchise of Green Lantern, such as it is. I felt really bad when Kyle's costume suddenly became like Hal Jordan light.
Yeah.
They completely abandoned his entire roots and instead made him, just another Green Lantern. And so I really like what's happened now where he's got a little bit of his old mask and a little bit of his old logo, and he's got things that kind of suggest like, this is that guy. He's a graphic artist. He was very proud of the costume that he designed.
I think some of what you're saying, too, fits Kyle's evolution, though. Because when you think about it, when Hal came back, it was almost like for this longest stretch, he was trying to find an identity for himself. Like, where do I fit in the Green Lantern Corps? Now that Hal's back, do I fit at all? Do I bring something to the table? And I think we've seen this evolution of this character where now he very much has his own identity again, which he had all along, and he earned that spot in his solo series. But I think now that you brought back this iconic Hal, I think that's something that Kyle fans were concerned about too, was because I'm a Hal guy myself, but I've also understand the other side of the coin. And I'm not a big fan of, just because you brought Hal back, you've got to get rid of Kyle. I think you're right. There's an interesting dynamic having all of these new lanterns mixing with some of the classic lanterns, and you get all new storytelling out of it. But I think that's his evolution of his costume kind of shows we're finally at a point where Kyle's his own man. Again.
Absolutely, and I like it a lot, and I like the fact that he can be his own man and still be part of the core. I was never 100% comfortable with the idea that, well, we're just going to make him Ion, so that way, maybe someday if his readers are really demanding, we can give him his own series. And we touched on this a little bit in our just emailing back and forth to set up the interview for today. I am a Hal Jordan guy, but in the spirit of being sensitive to Kyle's fans, I'm also a Wally West guy. Mm-hmm. And, you don't want to be in a position where you feel like your character is just being written into oblivion for a while. You like to know that there's going to be a role for him.
And it's interesting to say that because if you look back at a story like Green Lantern Rebirth, during that time, I guess I was so into Hal coming back, I didn't realize that it is very much a parallel to, because obviously the story that's being told in Flash Rebirth right now is going to be fitting Barry back into the DC universe. So that's going to be the focus of it right now. We're going to see characters like Wally and Bart and how they fit in with him, but I don't think we're going to get a feel yet for what they look like post all of this, which was something that you make a great point there. I don't think you got in Green Lantern Rebirth with Kyle until much later when the core series started and we got to really see him kind of that core series is really what kind of developed him as
it's bringing him back.
Yeah, well, he's got a spot.
Yeah. He kind of like disappeared for a little bit, and it's cool to see him come back. And also with Guy, Gardner coming, those two really were kind of drifting in the background, and we're seeing them come out. John's got the JLA, which I'm loving the fact that he's got a solid place now for him. So it's kind of cool to see them using the core concept and using it's more than just one man.
Yeah, and I love that because I actually, the period in time in Green Lantern that I got really attached to the book and to the characters was the Marv Wolfman, Joe Staton period in the 80s, where, there were a lot of core stories being told. It was actually called Green Lantern Corps for a long while. And then even after the destruction of the Battery, it was like the Green Lantern Corps of Earth. Like Hal was obviously the centerpiece of the book, but the stories that were being told at that time, by and large, couldn't have happened without Kilowog and Arisia and John. And this is at a time when Kilowog didn't even have a ring. And so it's really nice to see the Green Lantern Corps book being a stage for so many great characters to get a little bit of screen time and doing it so well, as opposed to, obviously, as often as not, team books don't do the best job of actually giving people development, and they just focus on telling big adventure stories because certain writers do have this kind of misguided notion that if you've got a team, you can't possibly develop the characters.
Well, I think it does help, too, that those characters... It's funny, I don't want to see those characters in solo books because I think that does often pigeonhole a writer where they can't take a character because, well, what are they going to do with them in the solo series, and is the development that I'm going to do going to mesh with what they want to do, and does that direction make sense? Do I start a relationship with the character in the team book, but then they've got a relationship going in their solo book, and how does that all fit together? The core, I think the strength of that book is the fact that it's able to explore other reaches of the DC universe, too, that aren't either haven't been touched on in a long time or haven't ever been introduced. Like they're introducing new races, they're expanding, maybe a Lantern character that was in the background that you kind of saw a little bit of now has this fully fleshed out world with politics and religion, and those dynamics play into the race relations and even religious relations within the Green Lantern Corps. And it adds to an interesting dynamic because some of the core members are neutral to these events, and they have to try to find a peaceful way to bring everyone together to accomplish the greater goals of the Corps.
And that's what I think really makes Green Lantern Corps a very different team book than a lot of other books. Because, even when you look at Justice League International, when it was international, you did once in a blue moon have a story that dealt with international intrigue in some way or another. The Crimson Foxes were often very nationalistic, and there was the occasional Cold War themed story that went on between Dimitri and the rest of the team. But by and large, you haven't had that. And universes, when you get into science fiction and fantasy storytelling, universes are kind of a larger scale metaphor for international relations and things like this. But, you figure the Green Lantern Corps, first of all, is bigger than any other team in DC anyway, which is hard to say when you have the Justice League. But furthermore, I don't think that it's been a long, long time, if ever, that we've seen a team book kind of do what it's doing this well, where you're right, they're introducing these concepts and they're introducing these conflicts. The fact that they're still taking through lines from the Ranthanagar War and things like that, and instead of just letting that story drop dead at the end of it and say, okay, well, they're done shooting at each other now, so now the war clearly doesn't matter. That's not how it works in the world, and so why would that be how it works in the DC universe? And so I think that those kinds of things are really exciting when you look at that in terms of how the characters and how the worlds are being developed in Green Lantern Corps.
And that does, for me, that makes for a deep, rich storyline. And then you've got this overarching thing that the Guardians themselves are now acting wonky. And they're adding, you've got the political dynamic already of dealing with all these different worlds and different races, but now you've got their overarching code is being constantly rewritten.
And also, furthermore, you have kind of what boils down to religious conflicts, because you have different interpretations on the part of different Guardians of how exactly the Blackest Night is going to come down.
Sure.
And obviously, on one hand, that's a kind of surface-level thing that's building to a specific story. But on the other hand, if it can happen now, then it can become organic to the makeup of the Guardians, and it can be something that they continue to carry on after Blackest Night is over.
One of the things I love about doing this podcast is the fact that we just go and we just start talking, and next thing we know, we were talking Booster Gold, and now we're having a very deep discussion about Green Lantern and the Green Lantern Corps, and it all started because of a comment we made about the costume.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that it all boils down to, somebody saying like, oh yeah, I like Hal's costume, and bam, we're off to the races.
But it is one of those things where it leads into what makes good costumes work in comics, in good comics, and how the costume becomes something where it's more than just a drawing. It's a great example of good writing in both of these cases, because we just pulled two great examples of books that are very well written, where the individual costume tweaks, if you look at the Lantern Corps, not a single costume is the same, but every costume makes sense. Every costume makes the character fit in their environment and who they are personality-wise as a person, just like we were talking about with Booster. So it is funny how that little tangent just so...
Yeah, no, it fit, but it was just, I'm just laughing because I'm like sitting back here going, oh my God, how did we do this?
Yeah. Back to Booster, though, there is one thing I do want to talk about with him. The fact when he zapped himself, I liked how fluid that was, because it really shows that at this point, I think Booster is very content with who he is in a way that I know he wasn't back in 52 even, for example, which wasn't that long ago. At this point, he really wants his history to play out the way that it did, so he winds up where he's at now. He's seen the danger of a slight little change to history, and what would happen to not only him, but to those around him, to the positive things that he has done since all of those events. Because, he's had to correct mishaps that he's made. He's had to correct mishaps that he hasn't made. There's been a lot of progress in his storytelling. You would not want to set in place anything that could possibly change all of that. And he just very fluidly in a couple of panels says, we got to zap him, and that's just the way it is. And, it'll be like a foggy dream, and no attempt to in any way alter his past.
And not just that, but a kind of more interesting element of it on a personal level is no attempt to rationalize it on either side.
Right.
No attempt to say, well, he's me, so clearly he'll know better. And also no attempt to sit there and talk himself into it. He just says, okay, this is what we have to do. This is how the universe works. And he doesn't have to sit there and tell himself, over and over again that this is why it's important or this is how it works this way. It's just kind of like, okay, well, we got to do this.
But a year ago, this conversation would have been different.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I love about it. And that's the part where I'm just kind of like, whoa, this is a character who has evolved.
And it's also kind of cool seeing that sequence when the zapped Booster is talking to Rip. That's right out of issue 4. You could take that page and match it exactly to the point in time in issue 4 when Booster's landing to Rip, telling him, "No, we only got one of the villains." I kind of ate that. I was like, man, that's cool. I wanted to. As soon as I read that scene, I started pulling out the back issues, and I'm like, I gotta find it to see if they make some, if they show a flash of light or something like that right before he lands. And I was just like, I like this.
I had the same reaction, and in fact, I talked with Dan about it when they first got back to that point. When he got back and started dealing with Flash, the issue where he was there for the lightning strike. there were just chunks of that story, and also in the last issue, the last part of Blue and Gold again. But there are big chunks of Booster where it's absolutely essential that he gets every line right, and especially because if he doesn't pull out the old comic and copy it, if he just says, well, I worked on this book so I can remember, then people can just reinterpret a change of one word, a change of body language, anything like that, as meaning that the time travel has somehow screwed something up. And so it's funny because you really have to be absolutely consistent unless you're communicating the message that the time travel's changed something.
Speaking of time travel, we got to talk just real quick about Rip Hunter. Because that was another creepy moment in this issue for me, was when Rip realizes that because of something that's happened, he can't go back home, and none of that stuff exists at the moment, the way that he left it. Which, to me, was an interesting... I'm a huge fan of time travel stories. I loved shows like Doctor Who. As a kid, and Voyagers, if it had Quantum Leap, all that stuff.
I was a huge Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure fan myself.
Both of those, and Bogus Journey. But, all that stuff, time travel things, whether they were humor-driven or they were serious... I've always been into that because it's always interesting to see people displaced and put into different places and how that affects and what it's like to interact with people who are somehow out of time. Well, with this poor Rip Hunter thing, you get to see kind of the creepy element to time travel, that one little hiccup, one little mistake can change your existence. And what does that mean to you? And what happens if you can return to, will you eventually just kind of blend in to what's happening around you? Or will you be the square peg in the round hole? And it was funny how I was overthinking that sequence, but I think that's a great example of a well-written comic, where I start thinking deeper than maybe the writer intended at that point in time, because that moment just had a lot of impact to me. And it was just a small little segment where Rip couldn't get back home. But it wasn't just so much that he couldn't open the door to get back home, it's that it wasn't there, and he knew it.
And I think that's a problem that's unique to Rip, too, because most other time travel characters, if you look at the history of these kind of stories, even in the DC universe, a lot of time travel characters have just traveled to the future, landed there, and said, oh, crap, this isn't the right future. So it's interesting because kind of there's a tacit implication here that Rip has put himself in a position where, he won't do that. He'd rather go back further and wait it out or go into time and try to fix it than move forward in time or move out of time and find out that the place or the time that he was trying to go to doesn't exist anymore.
It fits the responsibility we see from this character, because issue after issue... since we've seen this character, since we've seen this character kicked in 52, we've seen this intense sense of responsibility where, he was like this hermit hovering around this chalkboard and, really trying to play out how time was supposed to be and trying to follow the clues. And the way his relationships developed with Booster and how Booster's gained a respect for him. And because I think Booster sees that there really is, this guy has put the weight of the time stream on his shoulders to make sure that things do stay in order. And he knows the dire consequences of one little thing being out of place can change everything in a horrible way. And I love that.
I love the fact that in Reality Lost, the whole problem originated with the fact that the bad guy was stopped from stealing something.
Right.
Because, there's something really, the fact that Booster had to go back and kick Batman in the face, because if the bad guy didn't get away with his bounty, that all of history would be screwed up. There's something really interesting about that, and about the fact that that kind of story usually wouldn't be what you'd think. Usually you would think that the things that are out of place are, bad guys going back and trying to make the world better for them.
I love the thing, though, when Rip goes, you fixed it? On your own?
I know, it's like you come home and expect that the 8-year-old has somehow done something terrible to your car, and really he just moved it to the other side of the driveway because it was going to,
Yeah.
And I do like, too, we spent a lot of this talking about how much Booster's evolved and grown, but it was those moments, and I was glad to see that, because it was those moments where I'm like, okay, when you look back at the events, he has grown an intense amount, especially when you see him in contrast with himself, but he still skirts a lot of lines.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what's great about him.
He even answers that kind of, he's still, when he's like, you fixed it on your own, he's like, well, let's not go there.
Let's just not talk about how that happened. Yeah, that's a great element of the character too, because I really do think that I think this book would not work as well without the humor. And Dan always had a little bit of humor in Booster, and he tends to have a little bit of humor in most of his writing. But obviously, a lot of people first came to be acquainted with or affectionate towards Booster because of the Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis Justice League books. And I think that the reality of the situation is there's a certain segment of the Booster Gold audience that really reads it for hearkening back to that time. And that if there wasn't the humor, then, Booster is a book now that's selling, 40,000 copies per issue. And I feel like it would be substantially lower if they tried to tell it as a straightforward story with no humor all the time.
Well, you'd lose the identity of the character. And I think that becomes a huge problem because, if you got somebody that picks up the recently released Showcase and they read that and then they're saying, but I've been enjoying this Booster Gold book and this is not the guy that I'm reading now. I mean, you can look back at those original Booster Gold stories and you can see this guy there.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I love is when you can absolutely draw kind of a through line through disparate stories. And, there's no way that when he was writing the character in 1986, Jurgens could have known, that in 23 years you were still going to have not still, but, you were again going to have a Booster Gold monthly book. And there's no way that he could have known any number of things. You certainly can't prepare for things like Infinite Crisis. But the fact that the character is strong enough and consistent enough that you can kind of draw a line through almost any story, if not any story that he's been in, and say, they all kind of make sense together, at least on a thematic level, even if the continuities are a little bit wonky, is I think, absolutely critical, especially to a character like Booster who isn't Superman. Everybody doesn't know him. So month in, month out, if somebody makes a characterization mistake, that can be the first time anybody ever comes to be aware of him. And if you make if you mischaracterize something in a Booster Gold comic, that can become the canon. If you do it in Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, then the grand scheme of things, you'll get flamed on the internet for a month and then it goes away. But making a little mistake on a lesser known character can utterly change people's perception of that character
and cause people to drop the book.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that I really want to kind of accomplish when talking to you guys, writing the column, anything like that, I always like giving people a nice entry level into the character of Booster Gold and giving people insight into the character that makes it so that if they pick up next month's, they'll understand, at least the gist of the character. You can never be 100% sure that they're going to understand the story that's going on, especially with time travel. But it's always important, to me, and I know to Dan as the writer, that people can jump on and be reasonably comfortable on a month-to-month basis to these books, because you never know what happens. Next month is it next month? Yeah, next month when the books go up to $3.99. Are we going to pick up an extra 15,000 people who are really excited to see Blue Beetle, or are we going to lose 5,000 because it's an extra $1 for the book and the economy's in the toilet? It's really hard to say.
I'm a fan of the co-feature.
Yeah,
I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it on principle, and certainly I love, like with Manhunter is a great example. That book is starting at a new number 1,
right?
And so I absolutely love the idea that with more pages comes more content.
I also am a fan of the fact that the pairings make sense. Like if you're going to put a co-feature in Booster Gold, well, you better put Blue Beetle.
Yeah, it's the only one that fits, really.
I mean, it's not Ted, but I mean, thematically, there would be reasons for these guys to, even if these co-features bleed over at some point, or the writers decide to team up, these are two guys that it would make sense to team up in their book.
Well, and I mean, Booster had appeared in Blue Beetle's monthly. Aside from the fact that in Crisis he's the one who put Jaime in contact with the Scarab to begin with, but in Blue Beetle 25, it was literally this weird story where Guy Gardner, Fire, Ice, and Booster came to rescue him when the Reach was going to destroy the universe and kill him. And they all kind of got there, and they did their thing, and they worked together, and it's the triumphant return of JLI or whatever. And at the end of the issue, Jaime says, like, how did you guys know? Did Booster, like, grab you with time travel or blah, 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 blah? And everybody just comes up with, no, I was in the neighborhood. No, I heard it on the radio. No, just kind of a little dismissive thing. Like, nope, this was not the triumphant return of anything. This is just a nice little issue where we got to see these guys work together. But, so we did, they do have a history together, even as small as that. And like I said, I love the idea that with more money comes more content,
Absolutely.
That to me is just kind of a no-brainer. And, I think that DC is reacting to the market, because if Marvel's going to increase their prices and still outsell DC 2-to-1 on a month-to-month basis, then why the heck wouldn't you charge more? But if you're going to charge more, I do love the idea that something's going to be there, and especially that in the case of Manhunter and Blue Beetle and things like this, the something that's going to be there is something that's really worthwhile to a lot of people. Because, right. Speaking as a guy who I'm a huge Manhunter fan, like I said, I like the fact that she's not stepping on any writer's toes or anything like that, because it's a new title. But even if it was happening in any random book that it fit with, I would love to see that character again. Funny thing is, I'm not a huge fan of Jaime. I got nothing against the Matt Sturgis Blue Beetle. I never really read it. So this, when the character comes into Booster, is going to be my first month in, month out experience with that character, and so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. The only reason I express any reservations at all is because, like I said, you never know what's going to happen from month to month on sales, and that's why I think it's so important that you have in Booster a writer who absolutely knows how to handle the character, because comics are a serial medium.
Sure.
And the best way to make sure that sales stay up, even in spite of a price increase, or even in spite of a mediocre arc or a villain that somebody doesn't like, is to make sure that the ongoing narrative of the character and the ongoing history that people are following is compelling and interesting and believable, and all these things that we've been talking about.
And sometimes there's one word that I think we always throw out there, or avoid throwing out there, I should say, that I think people forget sometimes is at a core of why you go to any entertainment medium. Booster's fun. And I mean, that's a word, it's at some point in time, that word became almost like a dirty word. Like if you said it, you're diminishing it. And I think at the core, a good writer knows how to do all of these things we've discussed throughout this, but also keep it fun, keeping you entertained, keeping you wanting to come back because you just liked it. And there is something about that. At the core, Booster is a guy I just like.
Yeah. And we're talking about how with the bringing in Blue Beetle into the title, and it makes sense, the blue and the gold, but there's also that character, that Black Beetle that they showed earlier in Booster Gold, where they had the whole Ted Kord thing kind of, and he was a bad guy. I think we've probably seen the birth of that Beetle at the end of the Blue Beetle monthly series, because they had one of his characters kind of, kind of blame Jaime for the death of his friend, and take on one of the an extra scarab out there. So he very easily could be the Black Beetle that has appeared already in Booster Gold. So who knows if there could be very easily a chance for a cross through that way.
And it's interesting because Dan has said a couple things. First of all, he has told me that he doesn't right now have any plans to cross over with Blue Beetle, although he doesn't object to the idea. It's just that right at the moment they're pretty scheduled up. But he also, if you look at issue 18, when he has the teaser for what's coming next this year, or no, it might have been 17. Anyway, the Origins and Omens issue. There was in the Origins and Omens backup, there was kind of what's coming this year. And they had a little glimpse of the Black Beetle taking off his mask and Booster looking shocked and horrified, like, oh, goodness, it's you. So it'll be interesting to see how that is dealt with, because I do think that the way Sturgis ended that series, it was clearly implied to anybody who cared enough to really think about it, that Paco, it was Paco, right, who was in that? Yeah. It was clearly implied that Paco was the guy. So it'll be interesting to see if Dan had his own character in mind, and now there's going to be these kind of dueling narratives, or if the two of them have worked it out in between themselves, or something else. You know what I mean?
Or does that beetle necessarily have to be even the same one? Because could there be two different Black Beetles when you're dealing with time travel, I guess?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting is the reason I think that a lot of people immediately jumped to Black Beetle instead of generic bad guy number 3 when Paco took the extra scarab and got angry was that there had been remarks by the Black Beetle during the Blue and the Gold story that the reason he was trying to do everything that he was trying to do was because he didn't want Jaime to ever become the Blue Beetle, because he had lost a female who was important to him.
Right.
And so it really, like I said, everything absolutely fits. But does that inherently mean that even if it fits, that you can't have two? Certainly not. There's any number of people with Blue Beetle scarabs out there in the universe to begin with. They're, from what we can now come to understand based on the reach, they're about as common as a Green Lantern ring.
It's interesting looking at that silhouette, though, because I'm looking at that Origin and Omens segment. The silhouette, if it is Paco, it's years
later.
And years
it's
later
definitely
for him.
An adult.
So interesting to see what journey he went on to get to that point. It's definitely a character that I would like to see developed at some point.
Well, I know that he's going to be developed in the near future, and I believe that the solicitations that came out this Monday are suggesting that the Black Beetle will play a role in the story that's going on with Marv Wolfman's Teen Titans and Deathstroke.
Oh, cool.
I might be mistaken, or yeah, there you go. I might be mistaken on that. It might be that the Black Beetle is starting the next month immediately following the Titans story.
Okay.
But at any rate, by July, we're going to start to see activity on the Black Beetle front. And in the next year, we're supposed to see who's under that mask.
Cool.
We touched on one little thing, and we'll kind of end with this. When we talked about those co-features, I'm actually kind of glad that they're not going towards crossing them over right away. I think certain ones like Green Arrow, Black Canary, they're going to naturally lead themselves to crossing over, and more often. But like I want the creative teams. I like the idea that these are two separate features. I like the idea that I can read Booster Gold, and I'm going to get a great Booster Gold story, but I'm also going to get a great Blue Beetle story. And where one's kind of developing, one might be having some major event going on. And it'll be a nice, interesting, trade-off of getting two different flavors in a book every month, with the storytelling being in different places for both books, for example, if I'm making sense there.
Absolutely. I like that. One of the very few complaints, because like I said, I think these are really just spectacular superhero books right now. But one of the very few complaints I've had with the Green Lantern books is that because Jeff has such a drive and knows exactly where he's going with everything right now, there hasn't really been that kind of dynamic going on. Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps both hit their fever pitch at the same time and both hit their lulls at the same time. And so I absolutely agree with you that if you're reading a book where there's a backup feature, it'll be really nice to every so often, if you're in what they call in sports a rebuilding phase, in Booster, that maybe at the same time Jaime is getting thrown through buildings.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's going to be one of the strengths of these features. And I do like the fact that there's different creative teams on both of them, because it really is then in the sense that you're getting two different books in one. And I'm a big fan of that versus getting the same offering in the front that you're getting in the back. I think there's going to be a strength to that as well.
And I do think, too, that, because there's certainly a cynical group out there who are saying that, print is dead and it's only a matter of time before the four-color floppies go the way of the dodo. I think that what you're seeing with some of these co-features is DC trying to anticipate problems in the market and react to it. And so, like right now, when you go to Target or Walmart, older movies that you want to keep in your catalog but that don't necessarily sell that well, like the old Superman movies, The Matrix, and Bill and Ted and things, these are all available now on DVDs where you can pay $12 and get 4 movies, or $7 to get 2 movies or something.
Right.
And I think that when you look at information products, which is, DVDs and comic books are both information products, in the age of piracy and in the age of, Flash Rebirth comes out and an hour later it's been scanned and put on the internet. You want to have that. You want to be able to give people the idea that they're getting a bargain. And so I really do think that there is a long-term benefit to establishing this as something that they're willing to do.
Right. And that is important, too, because you develop very loyal fan bases. And what you've essentially done, which I'm hoping is what happens here, is you're getting 2 very loyal fan bases that are uniting and finding that they like the other character.
Yeah.
And they like the other offering.
Like I said, I mean, I said, just because I'm like the booster guy, I expressed slight reservation about the idea that, the book's going up by $1 and you never know what'll happen. But I overall am very excited by it. First of all, even though I said I've never really read it on a monthly basis, I always enjoyed what I did read with the Blue Beetle title, and I know that it's got a group of just absolutely rabid fans who adore the character and who adore the creative teams. And so, nothing would make me happier than for an extra 10,000 people to be picking up Booster Gold, and meanwhile, we give these 15,000 Blue Beetle fans an opportunity to see their character again. Because, I am a fan of Manhunter. I'm a fan of Young Liars. I'm a fan of Hero by Will Pfeiffer. I'm a fan of Chase. These are books that were absolutely fantastic at the times that they were canceled. And so nothing makes me happier than the idea that, people who are 13 now, like I was 13 when some of my favorite books got canceled, can, look forward to a comics community where the cancellation of your book doesn't necessarily mean you'll never see them again. And especially because Matt Sturgis and Mark Andreyko are writing these things, you're sitting here going, so they're committed to not just the characters and not just the quality, but presumably to the ongoing development and the ongoing story arcs of these characters, which to me, that's huge. You could very easily just try to say, hey, people like Blue Beetle, let's take whoever the cheapest writer on the market is and tack it on the end of Booster Gold because the characters make sense together. Right. And you can easily say, hey, Chuck Dixon is looking for work this month. Let's stick him on Manhunter. That's not a pejorative to Chuck Dixon, who's a fantastic writer and would probably knock it out of the park. I'm just picking a name out of a hat. Right. Because he's associated with Gotham. It's easy enough to say, hey, let's do this because it's easy and it's cheap and it's whatever else. Coming back and saying, even though you guys couldn't support a monthly book, we're going to give this book to you because we know that you're good with the character, speaks really highly of the way that DC's being run right now to me.
Mm-hmm. And it also shows that they're taking a look at the fact and recognizing that, okay, the comic book market's moving towards adding another $1 to what you're paying monthly for your books. So if we're heading that way, let's give people something that'll ease the blow a little bit. And I am a fan of that. Make me feel like I'm getting something more for that buck, and in many ways saving a character who I liked reading before. Manhunter's a great example. We did a Manhunter challenge on our show the first time around when it was canceled, and it's one of those books that it's very important to me. I think Kate's a character that has limitless possibilities on where she can go. And, same thing, Mr. Chibi from our forums is a diehard Blue Beetle fan, and I love Blue Beetle. I think moving him to Titans was a great move, but now this is a good spot for him, because you're gonna pick up a new readership for him that I think will naturally gravitate towards this character.
And that's one thing that I really like about the combination, is that I think when I was saying 10 and 15,000, I wasn't skipping around and being flip. I was literally saying there's about 15,000 Blue Beetle fans. Probably 5,000 of those already read Booster Gold.
Sure.
So, there's going to be some crossover because they're books with fairly similar sensibilities. They're books with characters who are thematically and historically linked. But I also think there's tremendous opportunity for both characters to benefit from the pairing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is kind of the perfect synergy in a situation like this. And that also, frankly, I feel the same way with Manhunter. I am excited to see what kind of interest she can generate from the sort of book they're putting her in. Because as much as I enjoyed seeing her in Teen Titans, or in, Birds of Prey, just so they could acknowledge, yes, she's not dead. And just as much as I like seeing, Jaime in Teen Titans for the same reason, if you really love a character and you loved reading their solo adventures, nothing ever does quite match up to being able to do that again.
Right. Especially when their supporting cast was so richly developed.
Oh, yeah, in both of those cases.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. The supporting cast were just as much of an important player to these characters, so to get a chance with them again, that to me is the key. Because at multiple conventions that I've been at, the questions come up, will we see, I know with Blue Beetle, will we see Jaime's supporting cast? And that was really interesting that was a question that was being thrown out more than once at different conventions. That means that those characters are just as important as the main character, which is, again, a sign of just great character development. So it's going to be fun. And
as a PS, just giving huge props to Mark Andreyko for Manhunter, not only because his own supporting cast was fantastic, but people who didn't read Chase 10 years ago, which is basically everybody if you look at sales numbers. I'm
one of them that read it, though.
Well, so all those supporting characters, the Justice Experiment characters and Dr. Von Trapp and all that kind of thing, these are characters who actually existed previously, and they were part of a fairly rich tapestry of supporting characters in the Chase Monthly.
Right.
And so not only did Andreyko have his own great group of supporting characters in Manhunter, but the incorporation of the Chase characters into that and the kind of creation of this mythology where those two groups or families of characters interact was really kind of cool. And I think that the idea of taking that larger group of great characters and moving it to Gotham, which is the largest DC family of great characters, is just extremely promising.
Draco was great, too, with that, at pulling in characters from the Young All-Stars and the All-Star Squadron, that whole, that tapestry and Infinity Inc., and just pulling those characters in and making them fit in that world, too. He really did pull a lot of characters that weren't getting the spotlight and made them into an interesting supporting cast, while at the same time creating his own original characters. It was interesting how he did that. And it was very well crafted that he pulled from a lot of different elements, which I thought gave Manhunter a very unique flavor, but also gave it this sense that her history had been around much longer than the first issue.
Absolutely. And I mean, the comparison that I would draw when looking at that model is James Robinson's Starman.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And when you compare anything to James Robinson's Starman, a lot of fans want to punch you in the mouth because it's like sacrilege. But when you look at the structure of the first 12 issues of Manhunter, and you look at the Manhunter Killer, for example, that story, that's the kind of thing that absolutely would have happened in James Robinson's Starman, and that's exactly the kind of dynamic that he gave, so that you can introduce the history of the character and you can play with the history of the character, but you're not a slave to it.
Yes, definitely. Amen on that.
And so I think that was, I've always loved the way that he dealt with history. I love Iron Monroe and Phantom Lady having such an active role in the book, but not actually having to suit up and go punch bad guys at age 90, which I never thought necessarily made sense for a lot of characters. It's okay for, Alan and Jay and some guys like that, but I do feel like one of the things Watchmen did get right is that sooner or later some of the old guys would want to just sit down.
Yeah, they'd want to retire and just say, okay, that's it. Time to, kick up the heels and enjoy, my golden years, if you will.
Yeah, and, here's the funny thing. As much as I say now that if Flash Rebirth writes Wally out, then I'll be upset, that final issue that Johns did with Wally deciding to hang it up and just go be with his family was such a beautiful and believable character moment for Wally that if they hadn't messed with him 6 ways to Sunday since then, I would not have objected at all if he didn't appear in a Flash costume ever again. So I think no matter how great the character is, they can hang up the cape if this story merits it.
Well, Jack Knight's a great example of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Talk about a character who basically they ended the story of, and quite well, and to the point where it didn't diminish anything that came before. He's being reprinted because it has such a cult fan following that I think if done right, and you do as long as you don't do a disservice to the fans and to the character. And that's when you talk about the character being rewritten, and it's kind of like you're losing, like, okay, why is he doing this now? And once you start asking those type of questions, that's where people start to get ticked.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it feels like, okay, is there a direction for this character? Do you have a plan for this character or not? And
the worst thing that can happen to a great comic book character is to become just another guy in tights and a suit flying around punching bad guys.
Bingo.
If you can't understand why he's in the room, which is, that's always one of the big criticisms of like those huge like JLA stories that Grant Morrison used to do where he called in all the reserves. It was kind of like all you really needed was an army of guys in tights. You could have had multiple men from Marvel come over and just do it. Mm-hmm. Because you kind of sit there and go like, what the hell was Guy Gardner Warrior doing in this scene? And by the way, isn't he supposed to be dead at the moment? You know what I mean? So there's the worst thing that can possibly happen to a character, and especially a great character like Jack Knight, or even Kate Spencer to that extent. I mean, I did have reservations at first until I saw it was being done about her joining the Birds of Prey for that reason. Because she was a character with a very specific motivation, and the idea that she could just be dropped into a superhero team didn't necessarily make sense.
It was handled well, though. I really enjoyed her in Birds. I know you're saying that, too.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that she's one of those characters that on the surface it's like, and I like that they played off of just what you're saying. They played off the fact that she doesn't fit. She doesn't play nice. And that was a constant theme with her.
Yeah, and they did that really well in the final Manhunter story before the Flash Forward, the one that was numbers 31 to 35 or something, where they went to Juarez. They played very well with that same kind of notion that at some point Kate and the Birds came to such a stalemate in terms of their philosophies that she just said, I'm going to go do this now. You can pretend I'm the bad guy and stop me, or you can help, or you can ignore me. But either way, this is the direction I'm walking, and you can figure it out for yourselves. And I thought that dynamic was one that they carried through Birds of Prey pretty successfully, and like I said, deposited it in Manhunter when she wasn't in Birds anymore.
Russ, before we wrap up, one of the things I want to make sure is to, first of all, remind everyone to check out, and you'll see this in the show notes, comicrelated.com. But Russ, is there anything else you want to shout out? Anywhere else you want to point people to? I know you mentioned the Newsarama blog.
Yeah, I do contribute at the blog at Newsarama. That's really all that we're doing right now. At Comic Related, one of the exciting things that we're doing in the near future, we have a bunch of web comics that are going to be rolling out soon, and I will be doing one or maybe two of those depending on how my schedule shakes down. I've got a superhero parody called Captain Internet, who's this goofball character I used to work with when I was literally at my college paper, and it followed me from between two colleges. And that'll be debuting in Comic Related sometime in the next month or so, along with, I think it's 7 other webcomics, some by new creators, some by established creators. But the one thing I would kind of point out, because it's even though it's Vertigo, it's a DC thing, is Young Liars. We talked all over the DC universe during this conversation, and we never quite touched down on Dave Lapham's Young Liars, which unfortunately the cancellation was just announced. But it's going to be around for at least another 3 or 4 months, and the second trade is coming out in June, I think, the first week in June. And just a fantastic read, and I would really encourage people to wander over and check out that book. It's definitely a very, very mature reader's book, One of my regular readers at the Newsarama blog said that part of the reason she loved the book so much was because it made her feel dirty month in and month out, but she still came back for more.
And you know what? Those are great examples of characters that just when you think you have a beat on where the story's going to go or where relationships might be heading, or they do something or they cut something off or they that you just don't expect to happen. And it's a great example, though, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's a great example of one of the reasons why we theme this show the way we are. I encourage people, if you've got a book that you're enjoying right now, not a book that, don't worry about books that you're not, a book that you're really passionate about that you think is great, tell people about it. Encourage people that you think might enjoy it to try it. And don't just tell them because it's a great book. Give them some of the details as far as what it is that's drawing you to that book. Because I think there's a lot of great titles that, I know there's a lot of great titles. And Young Liars is a great example of that. Of a book that I've been enjoying. Like, it was one of those books like Young Liars. I couldn't go to trade on Young Liars because I was enjoying it so much monthly. And I do go to trade with some of my Vertigo books, not because of quality, just because I kind of enjoy reading them in arcs. And some of the books tend to read better for me in arcs.
I think Fables reads much, much better in trade than it does in the monthlies, to be honest with you, most of the time.
It's just, I noticed that, and I still get Fables monthly, but I do find, and I'm actually totally agreeing with you with this, I do find that I enjoy getting it monthly, but then I enjoy stockpiling it until the arc is done. Then I go back through and read my monthlies. So, very similar to what you're saying. But Young Liars has been one of those books that I've consistently read monthly, because it's like Air. I'm enjoying Air for the same way. There's a short stack of books from them, House of Mystery, that I'm enjoying reading monthly. There's something in the monthly offering that I'm getting on that end. And I'm so sad to hear that this one was canceled because it's one of those series that from Vertigo that has a very unique flavor, and it's not just focused on the beginning. When you first read it, it looks like it's focused on two characters until you meet the ensemble cast.
Yeah. And the really funny thing about Young Liars is that Vertigo's audience is by and large, it's a slightly older audience. It's a fairly more academic audience, and a lot of them are kind of the sort of folks who, like me, have been reading comics for years and years and want to feel like there's some intellectual exercise behind it, even if most of the books we read are about guys in tights who punch each other. And so I'm always surprised when a genuinely interesting and a genuinely academic book like Young Liars just doesn't take off. That's a book where I could literally see them building a college English class just around the book.
Sure.
Because one of the things that you're always told from the day you start reading is that in the best mystery stories, the only person you can trust is the narrator. Because everybody else could be lying, everybody else could be the bad guy, everybody else could be the killer. Well, in Young Liars, the very first thing we're told is, hi, I'm Danny, I'm going to tell you this story, but you can't believe a damn word I'm saying. And, as often as not, when I talk to David Lapham, every month, I spend a good chunk of time just trying to twist through what percentage of the book is true this month, and how much of this, if we're trying to solve the ongoing riddle of this story, how much of it can we actually believe, even of what's just right in front of our eyes, let alone what's implied.
Yeah, I've reread this thing from start to whatever the current issue is at the time, multiple times, and I'm still trying to figure out the mystery, and still a little bit going, okay, what's real again? Now, wait, hold on. And it's one of the things I like about it, the fact that it's not a cookie cutter, spoon-fed story. This is something it's testing me, it's pushing me. I'm earning my adventure along with them.
Well,
I haven't. Sorry, what you're saying?
No, I think one of the nice things about that, though, it's funny. I've reread almost all of the issues 4 times because in chunks I've gone back and reread to kind of wrap my head around some new element that's been introduced. But it's never felt like, when you talk about work, it's never felt like I'm doing that. There's some stories where I do that to understand what's going on. I've always felt like I've understood the issues. I felt like I've enjoyed the issues. So it's not been one of those like my head hurts after I'm done reading it. I know you're not saying that either, so I'm not implying that. But I think it's an interesting distinction about my rereading experience about this is because the new element that's been introduced has made me curious to go back and reread because it's changed my reading experience with the original books that I read because it's made me question everything I thought I knew about the series. So I'm rereading because it's fun and because there's a new value to it, not because I didn't get it to begin with. I'm doing it because I'm genuinely interested in seeing, like, okay, what does this whole thing feel like now?
And to go back and make it accessible, because we're kind of talking in vagaries here, but to make that kind of this notion accessible to the DC Universe superhero readers who are listening to us, it's like what we were saying about Booster Gold when he traveled back in time and he meets himself, and then at the end of the story he falls back to exactly that same moment from Booster Gold 7 or whatever it was. And you were saying, you had to go back and reread number 7 to look and see, wait a second, was there a flash of light in the background or something?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. Young Liars is just a book that compels you to go back and reread, to look for that flash of light, to look for the plume of smoke, and to look for the guy in the background looking creepy.
Right, who all of a sudden turned out to not just be a background character, he was actually a very important plot element that had been there all along, but we never realized it.
Yeah, it's a lot like Grant Morrison's better issues of The Invisibles in that way, to be honest.
Yeah.
The first arc of The Invisibles where they had those guys on the flappers who walked past them while they were on the swing set, and that didn't pay off for something like 30 issues. And then finally, 30 issues later, you see that he's had it planned that far in advance, and you go, this guy's an insane person.
Right.
David Lapham does a lot of the exact same kind of thing with Young Liars, and it's really a shame that he won't have 30 issues to have it pay off.
No, and that's one of the hard parts about this series, because it's one of those books that I think it needs time to get that kind of like critical acclaim. And it's an unfortunate thing for me right now that I feel that a lot of great comics get canceled that would never in a million years have gotten canceled when the readership in comics in general was much higher. And that's what really bothers me at this point.
The funny thing is that I think that what happened is that as the economy and the industry has gotten better, and as readership has increased and all this kind of thing, you have increased expectations and also increased opportunity. So I think a book like Young Liars, prior to, say, Infinite Crisis, when we were at the lowest points of our readership and before the big boom has happened in the last 5 years, maybe Young Liars would never have even gotten made.
True.
And so we needed this little interval of time to make Young Liars a viable entity. But the problem is, outside of the comics industry, there are other factors in the economy and things that suddenly the time that we used to build, everything else was using to fall down. And now books like Young Liars that weren't viable until 2007 are no longer viable in 2009 through no fault of their own. I don't know if you necessarily follow what I'm saying there, but
I know exactly what you're saying. You're saying that the marketplace in general, both behind the scenes and in the fans' pocket, and I think it's a lot of factors.
That's exactly. I mean, like I said, I think that the weird thing is the difference between 2005 and now is kind of night and day. And unfortunately, the sales numbers that were generated by the big events after Identity and Infinite Crisis allowed people to take some chances. But by the time they got the ball rolling, got the books drawn, and everything like that, the chances that they're taking aren't paying off in the way that we all would have liked them to, because it isn't 2005 now, and you can't just turn it around in an instant.
And I don't know what the answer is, too, because it's not, like with situations like that, it's certainly not quality. Because we're talking about a book here that is nothing but a quality title.
I think that Vertigo's, shucks, I can't remember who it is that they've had some discounted, like some 99-cent issues and some 10-cent issues and things like that recently.
The big thing they're doing right now is a lot of $1 books. I know, I think that Unwritten, and I might be wrong on this one, I know the most recent issue of Air, not the most recent, the one before it, issue of Air was $1. And I know they've been going through the line and doing some different $1 offerings. I think one of the issues of One Written. I want to say it's almost the first one might have been $1 issue.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you're right. But my point being, I do think that'll help, because I think that with books that are genuinely good in a serial format, the biggest concern is making people aware that they're out there, making people aware that they're good. And obviously comics don't have the huge marketing budget that, movies and things do. So you aren't going to see an ad for it on TV and go, ooh, neat, let's try it. Yeah. And so people need to be, this is a horse that needs to be led to water. And I think that Vertigo is doing their best right now with these dollar offings. And Haunted Tank and, what was the other one? Unknown Soldier were both reprinted for free and handed out at the New York Comic Convention. And, some things like that. So obviously it's not due to an absolute lack of effort on the part of DC Vertigo that people aren't aware. But I do think that one big problem Young Liars has faced is that consistently Vertigo books sell more in bookstores. It's at least in the trade paperback market. They sell more in bookstores than in traditional comic book stores, where, Fables probably has more people buying it from Barnes & Noble than from their retailers. And I think that, and when I say more, I don't necessarily mean more. I don't have numbers in front of me, but I do mean demonstrably more than anybody has any reason to expect from a superhero book.
Brian Azzarello said it. It was one of the Vertigo panels. I want to say about 3-4 years ago. When we were sitting there, and he wasn't saying it in an insulting way, and he even prefaced that. But he just said, it's funny, when we go to comic conventions and we do these chats, he said, you're not our target audience. He said, there is an audience out there for Vertigo that is not your comic convention fan. He said there is an audience that's looking for the bound bookshelf format of the trade, that is looking for us in bookstores, and it's a completely different audience than what we're dealing with here. And he said, I'm not saying that in any way to insult the comic audience, the traditional comic audience. He just said that it's kind of a reality with Vertigo.
I agree, and I think that the problem Young Liars has had, unfortunately, is I don't know that they ever connected to that audience. Mm-hmm. I think that Young Liars was trying to sell a non-comics product. I put that in quotes because obviously it is comics.
Right.
But I think they were trying to sell a non-traditional comics product to a traditional comics audience and failing. And what you didn't see was the 10 copies of, Daydream Believer showing up on the shelves of Barnes & Noble like 10 copies of every Fables trade do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that is. I don't know. Maybe it was buzz. Maybe DC did drop the ball on promoting it to the retailers. I don't know where that happened. But I really do believe that the difference between a Vertigo book that can continue for 60 issues and a Vertigo book that ends at 20 is that the first trade paperback doesn't sell 40,000 copies at Barnes & Noble.
Amen. Yeah. I totally agree with you. And it's sad. I hate seeing books like that canceled, just as much as my superhero ones. My Vertigo books, Jim and I don't get to talk about Vertigo as much as we'd like to. The last couple Speeding Bullets that we've both done some trade-offs on Vertigo titles that we're enjoying, just because of the fact that we wanted to get the word out about some of them that we've been really enjoying. But Young Liars is certainly one of those that book being canceled is going to be a gaping hole in my monthly reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is too, the last couple of months, my butt has been kicked on the week that came out, because the week Young Liars comes out is the same week Booster comes out, mm-hmm. and there's 2 or 3 other Walking Dead and 1 or 2 other books, and so it was like I couldn't read anything that was ancillary, because the monthlies that I get and that I love and that I write about every month were so prevalent on those weeks that I just didn't have any time until at least halfway through the week to go and pick up something that I was going to give a try to, which to me, that's not a bad problem to have. I love having a week where I know there's going to be 4 or 5 or 6 just fantastic books. And so not only is it going to be a gaping hole in my read pile, but it's kind of like when that week rolls around and it's not so overwhelming, it's going to be a little depressing.
Right. Because that's the good kind of overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I love the problem of having like 6 books in front of me and wondering, okay,
which one
do I want to read first?
Yeah.
That's a good problem.
And knowing that I'm not going to go wrong either way, it's just a matter of, which flavor is the one that's like glowing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny to have that problem because obviously there's other weeks where you just kind of look at the release list and go like, how the heck am I, when I'm doing the hot shot of the week and trying to say what's the best comic out this week. There are weeks when I look at the mainstream publishers poll list and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to find some indie book that was good 2 years ago and I'm just going to promote the hell out of it this week because there's nothing from DC and Marvel. And so it's really always wonderful when you have the opposite problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then you got too much to choose from and makes writing a column, I'm sure, very interesting.
Oh, yeah. Well, and doing these creator commentaries, last month in particular, because not only was it a big week for all the books that I mentioned, but also Terry Moore's Echo, which comes out every 6 weeks, and so it's on an irregular schedule, came out that day. And I do have a regular column where I talk to Terry Moore. And so on the same day, I had to read and then generate questions for Booster Gold 19, Warlord number 1, Echo number 11, Young Liars number 14, Walking Dead number 61 or whatever it is. I just kind of sit there and go like, those are 5 books that would probably be the best book that came out any week they were released.
Easily.
And the fact that like I'm still far behind and I still haven't transcribed all those interviews because as a print journalist sometimes you got to listen to these transcripts and it takes forever to get it done. And so the fact that I still don't have my Terry Moore or Mike Grell articles out on the internet yet is just kind of like, wow, I really just got the crap kicked out of me that week.
Yeah, but I mean, again, a good problem to have because the things that you're transcribing are things that you actually really enjoyed.
Oh, yeah.
Reading and chatting about to begin with because you actually believe in the product. Because all of those, the Warlord, the relaunch of that's been great. Terry Moore's Echo has been outstanding.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, too, that with Echo and Rassel both starting at the same time last year, and both of them, frankly, having kind of lackluster first issues, I just remember sitting here going, like, how in the world is it possible that Jeff Smith and Terry Moore left Bone and Strangers in Paradise and didn't hit the next one out of the park? And I'm really happy to be able to say that, a year later, looking back at the follow-up issues after that, those books are both substantially improved to the point where I kind of feel silly looking back on those first issues and saying I was disappointed.
Wait, Razzle? It was funny, and I agree with you on Razzle. The first issue, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't. But after the first 3 issues came out, I liked them so much that I bought that oversized trade of Razzle because it was oversized. And I'm like, well, no, this got to be so much fun. Where if you'd told me the first issue that I was going to do that, I would have laughed because I would have said, you know what, I would have done that with Bone, but Razzle, I'm going to pick it up because I'm a Jeff Smith fan. I'll follow his work, but I don't see myself rebuying this, and I did.
Yeah.
Because he sold me on the later issues.
And that's exactly, like I said, it and again, that's a great problem to have, to suddenly be sitting there going, I want to spend an extra $20 on this because it was so damn good in hindsight, But it was just one of those things, like when you look at those two releases came out, I think on the same day, Echo number 1 and Rassel number 1. And I just remember reading them and going, like, really? Because these are the 2 most talented cartoonists possibly in America. How is it that these books aren't better? And thank goodness they became better almost immediately.
Well, it's funny. I look back at both of those first issues, and the word that comes to mind is prologue.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And when you read issue 2 and 3 and so on of those books, that's really where the meat and potatoes starts to kick in for those books, and it's really just, they're both wonderful reads.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, in trade form, you absolutely don't get the sense of disappointment that you get when you have a 22-page story that doesn't stand under its own weight. And really, I know for a fact that Terry's writing Echo for the trades, and the monthly is just kind of a way of getting the word out there and reminding people that he still exists. And I'm sure that Jeff Smith probably has a fairly similar approach, considering that he's probably made 90% of all his income historically on the Scholastic editions of Bone as opposed to the floppies.
Right. All right.
All right. It's been fantastic talking to you guys.
Oh,
Yes.
you know what? You too. And I mean, I got to tell you, New York. It was such a pleasure talking to you, New York. And I'm sorry this took so long to get together, but I'm glad we finally got to do it, and we definitely need to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to sit down. What we should do one of these days is maybe when Manhunter comes out, right after I get a chance to talk to Mark, because that'll give us about a month and a half to shoot emails back and forth. But
Let's do
also,
that.
that'll give us a really good thing to talk about, because obviously we got into 5 minutes of it. I know I could talk about Manhunter for an hour.
Let's definitely plan a Manhunter follow-up. So we'll do that's a lock. Let's do that for sure, because that'll be a great chance to revisit some of our commentary on these co-features when we've actually gotten a chance to see them executed then too.
Right, absolutely.
So it'll be a great chance, especially with a book that we're so passionate about like Manhunter. So let's plan to do that again. And definitely check out comicrelated.com. Check out Russ's Newsarama blog. Check out your upcoming webcomic, Captain Internet.
Yep.
So, and I'll have those all in the show notes. So definitely please check those out and support Russ. And we're going to be putting up, you and I chatted about, we'll put up a banner on our site too to link you right to Comic Related so people can check you guys out and support you and what you're doing over there. Because the articles look fantastic, and I'm definitely going to be a supporter of Comic Related as well. So.
All right, well, much appreciated, and like I said to you, we'll be doing the same thing for Raging Bullets as soon as I can get Chuck out of his desk chair. He is absolutely pounded right now because between convention season and the new features that are being rolled out on a day-to-day basis on our site, and the fact that these webcomics are coming down the pike, my editor Chuck is just absolutely never sleeping. So.
You know what? That's a good reason to be busy, though, because that means for people that are listening right now, Comic Related is a site that you want to bookmark and that you want to check out regularly because there's going to be new content coming. So it's you don't want to make your first visit your last. You want to make regular visits to comicrelated.com.
I mean, the one sentence sales pitch I can say before we go is that when I came on board versus now, our traffic on a month-to-month basis has grown by more than 1,000% in less than 2 years.
Wow.
So the fact is, people are catching on to the fact that good things are happening at the site, and there hasn't been a single month for the last 8 months that traffic has gone down. So consistently, people are coming back more than once after they've come and seen us for the first time. So check it out, and this is not just coming from a guy who loves working there, but just as a comic book fan, we have a lot of really cool stuff there, and I think anybody who goes there and checks it out is going to want to make it one of their regular sites they visit.
And like you said, original content. People are going to come and check out and always get original content that they can only find at comicrelated.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a good example is me, working at Comic Related and working at the blog at Newsarama. Newsarama obviously is a monolith, and one of the things that I told them when I told them I would love to work with them is that I couldn't possibly leave Comic Related. As a reporter, I feel irresponsible just reprinting the same stuff in a couple of different sites. So what I'll do is when a conversation happens, I'll put the Q&A with no commentary, no notes, just a little introduction and a little bit of art up on the blog at Newsarama. And then Comic Related is where I get into the meat and potatoes of it. It's where you get commentary, analysis, follow-up questions, reader questions, preview art, things like that. And so absolutely no disrespect meant to Newsarama, but for me as a writer, if you read my stuff, read my interviews, read my conversations, and you enjoy them, then Comic Related is absolutely 100% the place to go read it, because that's where you're getting the broad majority of the information.
That's fantastic. All right, well, again, thank you for joining us.
Man.
And thanks very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be talking to you soon. So
I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Sean and Jim, it's Brent Kossina back again with another edition of BK's Bullets. It's been a while. Yeah, it really has. But I just had something tonight that I just had to tell you guys about. Had to comment on it. I was like, this is totally some Raging Bullets moments stuff in here. I need to get this out right away, ASAP, as soon as possible. I'm talking about the new animated Wonder Woman DVD. Have you guys seen this? This is fantastic. And I know I haven't been the biggest fan of these in the past. Superman Doomsday, I thought it was okay. New Frontier, you guys raved about it. I was really disappointed with it because of, I don't know, it was an adaptation, and we've had this discussion on here, Comic Timing, on forums. I just was looking too forward to a literal adaptation, a la what we got in Watchmen that you guys are discussing now. But and I think I recall saying that I wanted just plain original stories out of these animated DVDs, and I finally got exactly what I wanted in this Wonder Woman DVD. It's not based off any particular story, not the George Perez, not the original. It's just, here's Wonder Woman's origin, born from clay, Steve Trevor comes down, escort back, let's throw in a little Ares, some monsters, we even get the cheetah at the end, which is great. It was just fantastic. It had everything in it that I wanted. It was brutal. It was not girly. I mean, if you guys have seen this, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is a PG-13 film. This film is brutal. Wonder Woman, or not, it is, the Amazons kill people left and right. Wonder Woman uses her headband at one point to boomerang, and I think she slits two guys' throats with it. It's just insane. It's just insane with all the violence and fighting, and you can enjoy this. It's not made for girls. This is like a guy's Wonder Woman comic. When you buy the Wonder Woman comic and you're like, it's a girl comic. Is anybody gonna make fun of me for reading this, or is anybody gonna make fun of me for watching this? No. If they watch this, they'd be like, dude, this is awesome. This is amazing. It was great, and I, as you can probably tell, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I hope they can make a Wonder Woman movie, live action, that's just as good as this. No holds barred, brutal warrior woman thing. It was just amazing and incredible. And also what I enjoyed a lot about it was the voice cast. Kerry Russell's Wonder Woman was great, but the real standout for me was Nathan Fillion as Steve Trevor. The guy was just fantastic, just hilarious, sarcastic. The scene in the hospital was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, let me just give you a brief overview. Wonder Woman's in the hospital. Steve brings her there, and he saves her, and they have this moment, and there's almost this kiss, and I don't want to ruin it because it's just a laugh out loud moment. And then the moment in the jet where he's just, he's talking to Wonder Woman, and he's going, I'm really just not misogynistic, but he's just I'm just a womanizer, and it's all a facade. I just didn't want to get hurt again. And he's like, why am I telling you this? And then they zoom out, and he's got his foot in the lasso. He's like, God, I hope you guys don't mass produce those things. It was just hilarious. I just laughed my ass off during this movie, and that's probably why I enjoyed it so much, just because of this one guy, Nathan Fillion as Steve Trevor. Whoever wrote this, I don't know who it was. I just finished watching it literally. Got to the credits, I pressed pause, pulled out my microphone, turned it on, and just started recording because this thing was just awesome. I just had to say it. So if you guys haven't seen this, go out and see it. Go out and buy it, rent it, whatever you need to do. It's just amazing. I bought the 2-disc DVD. I'm about to watch the special features. I already watched the first disc. On the first disc, it's got a bunch of stuff about New Frontier, Gotham Knight, and the first look at Green Lantern. Basically, ads for the other DC animated movies that are going on right now. And disc 2 has also got some other stuff. I haven't watched that yet, so I'm about to get into that. But I just wanted to drop a quick line and say I'm still thinking about you guys, but I finally found exactly what I wanted out of these DC DVDs. So if Green Lantern is an original story just like this one, it's going to be just as good. Because from what I saw in the Green Lantern preview, we got Victor Garber from Alias and Eli Stone as Sinestro on the Green Lantern, and you got Christopher Maloney from Law & Order SVU, one of my favorite shows on TV, as Hal Jordan. He's like the take no shit cop on that show. If you watch that show, you'll know what I'm talking about. He just doesn't take anything from anybody, and I can't wait to see him as Hal Jordan. I'm so excited about all of the DC films from now on. If they're tailored and just like this Wonder Woman thing, I think they finally found what they were looking for. For me personally, I know other people really, really enjoyed New Frontier. I thought Gotham Knight was a little subpar below. I mean, just the mix-up of stuff. But this is like their super high niche right here. You know, just as like Marvel has been doing with their animated features, original stories, and they were been doing great. Like the Iron Man one was my favorite. The Avengers ones were okay. I mean, but the Iron Man one by far was my favorite so far. I haven't seen the Hulk versus yet, but I heard that's pretty good. But you know, the Iron Man was the same thing before that movie came out. It was the original. It was an original story about the origin, and it was great. And this Wonder Woman one was fantastic. The animation is great. The animation style, I love the look of this thing. It looks, you know, there's enough detail in the characters that it doesn't make me feel like I'm getting gypped off of because of animation. You know, it's got more detail than the JLU series Wonder Woman or any of those characters. You know, it's not the typical Bruce Timm style. I think he's a producer on this one. I'm not quite sure, but hell, I mean, the guy's got a job for the rest of his life as long as he keeps doing these DC projects. You know, he's probably going to do all these movies, so God bless him for that. But I just loved it, and they make sense of the costume. Like, why is her costume red and stripes with the stars, or not stripes, but you know, red, gold, and blue with the stars on the panties? It's like, you know, and as typical Amazon garb, we're going to adopt the colors of the other country to show that we come in peace. And it was like, what? Where did they get this from? Like, that makes so much more sense now. It was just, like, everything made sense in this movie. There's nothing that I went, oh, that's kind of weird, or, oh, I don't like that, or, I had no moments like this. I sat down, pressed play, and I just enjoyed the heck out of it. Everybody needs to go and watch this film, whether you rent it, you buy it. If you buy it, I guarantee you will not be disappointed, because if you're hearing me rave about this and you heard me talk about New Frontier and you're like, that dude's crazy, he didn't like New Frontier, then if you hear me rant about this and saying how great it was, then just go out and get it. And I'm probably rambling right now, so I'm going to stop. I will see you guys later. I'm going to find something else, because Bullets to Promise Back to Comics, maybe the Azrael comic when I get it on Monday, or when my shipment comes in. But we'll talk to you guys soon, and always appreciate your time. Bye.
It's funny, I've been waiting to do commentary beyond like little short snippets about the Wonder Woman DVD, just because I liked it so much that I want to do a beginning to end walkthrough of it and just kind of enjoy the whole thing, because I totally agree with you. It was my favorite as well. It's funny, when these were originally announced, my excitement was they announced this line as being adaptations of famous stories. So they were going to do the Titans story, and they announced they were going to be around an hour, you know, around that ballpark. And I was excited to see a lot of famous stories brought to life on the screen, and that was the original premise behind this whole line. So it's funny that, you know, what's drawing you to it now is the fact that they've gone to original stories. I love New Frontier, but this was easily my favorite out of them. I totally agree with you. And I agree that I think it's because it was an original story. And that's not a knock on New Frontier, what they did there, but I think the freedom of being able to craft a script and to craft a story that pacing-wise and development-wise falls within the time frame that they're doing these in is a strength. The Green Lantern one is supposed to, at least from everything I've looked at with the previews, that looks like that's totally an original story as well. So that's a good move. I liked Gotham Knight because that was also all original stories. But this one, I agree with you. There was something special about this one, from the humor with Steve Trevor to the relationships with her mother. I've got to say one thing when you're saying it's not made for girls. I think this is a movie that was made for everybody. I think there's this impression that girls don't like action and drama that guys do, and I think this is a book, Wonder Woman, the comic now. If you read the comic now, I think that's a comic that's for everybody. You can easily hand that to any guy and say, you know, turn the page on this. There's no shame in picking up that comic, but it does have strong relationship drama and development in there that appeals to males and females. I think it is one of those books that's universal in its approach, and I think this movie was as well. The bits with the mother and the Amazons and Artemis was fantastic. Rosario Dawson, I thought she did an excellent job on that, speaking of voice casting, because Artemis is a fantastic character. But also, I loved the intrigue that Ares would cause some of the Amazons, like Persephone, to change allegiances and how that would affect that type of drama. It was a great story that there was a lot going on. The fact that Ares and Hippolyta had a son together, and that there was some shame in that for Hippolyta, and that this daughter was, in many ways, a redemption for her. I thought was really great development in this whole thing. It's a very interesting story if you're a Wonder Woman fan on any level, or if you've been like, geez, what's a way that I can kind of jump into Wonder Woman and get my feet wet with what this character is all about? I do think that this hits to the core of the honor of this character and the strength to her, and what separates her from Superman and Batman. The fact that there's a reason to, she's going to get violent, and she's a warrior, and it's a warrior race, but yet she's a hero as well. I love the bits when she and Steve were out on the date, and she calls him on the typical guy move of, hey, let's have some drinks and maybe to loosen you up a little bit. Well, her Amazon metabolism doesn't work with that. He's getting sloppy drunk, and she realizes, hey, Mom was right about you guys. And it was such a fun and interesting and entertaining story all the way through. And in between that whole bit, they get mugged. You're going to mug an Amazon? I don't think so. Led to just a great action sequence, and through that action sequence, she got to fight some of Ares' minions at that point. One non-stop action moment after another. It was nice pacing because we got great character development, and in between there, we got great action that furthered the storyline. Nothing was in there. Nothing was in there for no reason. There was every bit, every scene had a purpose towards leading you to the conclusion of this story, and it was great because you got to see an origin of this character that was to the core root, and it looked like they pulled from a lot of different Wonder Woman eras. The things that were core pieces, stuff with her outfit is stuff that has been pulled in before in Wonder Woman storytelling. But you're right, everything felt like it had a fresh twist as well, and I liked that. They putting it all together the way that they did. I know Gail Simone was there was the story writers, and then there was the script writer. And I know that Gail Simone's partner in the story writing was the one who did the script writing or screenplay as well. I'm not sure how that works out, but the story development, to me, definitely felt very much like it was in tune with the theme and emotion that I get from the current Wonder Woman comic. So it felt to me, while it was a very unique experience, thematically, mood and tone and presentation, it felt very comfortable being a part of the Wonder Woman universe. And I liked that aspect of it. It would be a great way to introduce people to the Wonder Woman comic. I'm thrilled that you were digging this one as much as I was. We had the advantage of seeing it in New York before it was released with a whole group of people. And that community aspect of seeing this movie and laughing and enjoying this action and drama and you're right, Steve in the plane, that particular moment where the lasso was touching him was fantastic. Also, when the Amazons were grilling him originally on Paradise Island, and he was wrapped up in the lasso and found out for the first time that, hey, I just, as a soldier, I can't just do my name, rank, and serial number here. I'm going to be blurting out everything, including how I feel about the looks of Diana. It was just such a great bit. Everything about it. I can't recommend it enough. If you did not pick this up, do yourself a favor and go out and grab it. I picked it up on the Blu Ray, and I adore it. My wife had a great time watching it. Jim, I know, picked it up as well, and the bonus features on there are a lot of fun. It was just really neat to see this amazing presentation. And it's funny, my original excitement at these releases was at adaptations of classic stories. Now it's like, please, more originals. This is a great opportunity for and more originals where you're pulling in comic writers on some capacity to really nail this. I think there was a nice combination of people both inside and outside of comics putting this together, that we got something fresh and unique that felt really good for DC fans. And if you, like I said, pick this baby up. And Green Lantern this summer, First Flight, is going to be another wonderful one. We'll probably do, I'm assuming, Wonder Woman around the same time we do Green Lantern, maybe a little bit sooner, hopefully. I want to fit it in now, but time-wise I haven't been able to get together notes and really delve on that. But I want to delve on this DVD because I think it's one that'd be fun to have a conversation about from start to finish what made this baby so cool. So Jim and I will definitely do that down the road. And thanks for doing the audio comment on this, Brent, because I'm thrilled to hear you geeking out about something that I enjoyed so much, because there was something about this that set it to it. Like took the ones that I'd already enjoyed, and I liked all of them so far, and took it to a whole new level of cool. I want to remind everyone you can check out Brent regularly on the Comic Timing Podcast. So if you liked him here, you definitely want to check him out on that show. And thanks again, Brent, for the participation and BK's Bullets.
Holy caffeine!
I want to give a quick shout out to the Zuda Comics web line from DC. It's ZudaComics.com, or you can go to the DCComics.com website and just click on Zuda, or on RagingBullets.com. Actually, along our top bar now, I put a link directly to Zuda, because I really have had an enjoyable week. I read all of Bayou, and they just actually updated it today as of when I'm recording this. It's Wednesday, and there's just an update. And I read the new pages. I absolutely loved it. It's just a fun, rich series. But they've got the current May 2009 group up for the competition, which includes Amber Hale Supermodel, which I read and enjoyed, Beer Town Boys, Clandestino, Cubicles, Flowing Wells, Freak City, Gone Zombie, Lily of the Valley, Obsec, Sides. The stories range from action-adventure to horror to sci-fi to drama to comedy to fantasy to historical period drama. There's really a rich diversity here. These competition pieces, they seem to be they're all 8 pages long. So it's real easy to kind of just make your way through and pick out the ones that you like. You log into the site and you have a chance to vote on what you think your favorite one is, and actually put rankings and comments along with each of the stories. These are all up and coming, some are professionals, some are new comic writers and artists, and they're really just a diverse lineup. So for those of you guys like in between getting your weekly books that are looking for some interesting reading, check out ZudaComics.com. It's another spot on the web. There's some great web comics out there right now, and this is just another spot on the web to check out some interesting, new, fresh work that's a little diverse and a little out there. So I'm having a blast. I'm absolutely having a blast with this right now. I'm going through all the contest pieces. I got through the first 4 so far: Amber Hale Supermodel, Beer Town Boys, Clandestino, and Cubicles. Cubicles was an absolute laugh riot. I really had a good time with that. It was like The Office meets sci-fi, and for the first 8 pages, I'm curious to see where this story goes. But I think there's something on this site for everybody, and those are just the ones in the current competition. There's so much material on this site. If you click on Explore Comics, there's just a ton of books and ranges from superhero, fantasy, action, adventure, comedy, horror, drama, romance, modern, historical, and there's other genres. So they're really just not. There's a story. There's one called Alpha Monkey, Santa Claus versus Dracula, Azure. You could just go on and on. This one called Alone had very beautiful artwork to it. So I'm just finding a lot of stuff to kind of jump around and explore, and I've barely touched. It looks like right now there's 185 different offerings on this site. So do yourself a favor and check them out. There's material up there for everybody. I mean, this is all free. Just go and check it out and have a good time with it. Bayou, though, I liked it so much. I was thinking about pre-ordering the Bayou book. I haven't done that. I'm going to go buy it now. I really am. It was that good that it warranted a purchase. So I urge all of you to check out Bayou, because I'm going to pick up the print version of it now because it was so interesting and entertaining. So if any of you have checked out ZudaComics.com, please give a call into RagingBullets.com and let us know what books you're enjoying and why. What really floated your fancy and pointing people to it, because I think this is something we could all support and just have a good time with. Webcomics are fantastic in general, so I'm glad to see that more companies are exploring this medium. I'm glad to see more independent work out there, and a lot of these guys are people who are doing web comics of their own right now, or independent comics of their own, and this is just another way to get some exposure. So I think it's just a wonderful site and a rich site with some great medium. So Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, where you can pick up Blackest Night #1, regularly $3.99, 75% off, only 99 cents. And there's a number of variants available, so check those out as well. Booster Gold #22, written by Keith Giffen, co-feature written by Matthew Sturgis, art by Dan Jurgens and Norm Ratmond, co-feature art by Mike Norton, cover by Dan Jurgens and Norm Ratmond. Day of Death Part 2. Booster Gold travels back in time to prevent the Black Beetle from killing the New Titans. But who will save Booster Gold from the Black Beetle? And what role will Deathstroke play? And in the all-new Blue Beetle co-feature, Jaime must battle a flying robot army from destroying all of the people in El Paso. It's a 40-page book, regularly $3.99, 40% off, only $2.39. And I'm excited for these co-feature books, so that's one in particular that I'm excited to check out the co-feature of. I've been enjoying Booster Gold greatly, and I'm so glad to have Blue Beetle back with the same writer. It's great to have that back, and art by Mike Norton, that's a dream book for me. Whatever your shipping preferences, bag and boarding preferences, DCBService.com accommodates your collecting needs. Don't forget to check out InStockTrades.com, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes hardcover. Collecting Action Comics 858 to 863, $24.99, 37% off, only $15.74. InStockTrades.com offers free shipping on orders of $50 or more and has a ton of collected editions in stock and ready to ship. Thanks for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Want to remind everyone to check out the CollectionDrawer.com for the drawer box storage system with the box sort upright dividers and the box locks to make sure that these boxes don't tip when you're opening up the top boxes, which is really great because it is something I noticed when I first got my drawer boxes, and when I pull out the top box, it would start to tip a little bit. I mean, collection drawers are absolutely a wonderful product. Both of these products have actually changed my collection drawers, and it's great because I had the original boxes. You can retrofit those boxes right from the website. You can order some retrofit kits to actually upgrade your boxes. I love the fact that they support not just new people who are checking out their products, but also people who've had their products for some time. As their new innovations come out, they support us. We're able to retrofit our boxes and continue to use them. It's the CollectionDrawer.com. These boxes are incredibly sturdy. I've seen at conventions demonstrations of them where there's somebody standing out a drawer box. So they can be stacked 6 high, full of comics, which is great. But those new upright dividers that are in there, I just stuck them in my boxes now, and I am absolutely adoring them. No more spines being bent on your comics. No more bent comic books when you think you've stacked everything all nice and neatly. I've had that happened twice to me where it was really bad because I was looking for an issue, and I actually ended up repurchasing it. It turned out the issue was bent in half underneath my issues just because of the fact the way that books will shift when you're stacking them. And it was incredibly frustrating to have that happen, as all of us know. We cringe afterwards. I'm like, oh no, just such a good issue being bent up like that. It's the whole reason why we put them in boxes is to protect them, and the reason why we bag and board them is to protect them. And this system is perfect for that. It's for the collector. So if you haven't, go to CollectionDrawer.com and definitely check them out. I am a huge fan of them. They're wonderful boxes. All of my comic boxes are drawer boxes, so I'm glad and proud to support them. Listener voicemails will be back next episode, and we want to have you guys share your comments. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype, and I'd definitely love to get your comments on the show. Jim and I are going to be chatting about all kinds of voicemails. BK's Bullets is a great example of something that, it's all friends of the show and listener content. We love having that on as many episodes as possible because your thoughts and your ideas playing off of ours is something that's really interesting for us. So please definitely consider participating in those. Check out RagingBullets.com, particularly the Life in the Gutter article that's always up there. Mart's blog we're linked to. We're linked to listener rants. Up on the top of the page, just to make things kind of convenient for DC fans, I put up some links to some interesting things on our website and outside of our website, like DC The Source. You can get there directly from our site. ZudaComics.com. I put a little commentary for myself about Zuda Comics on this episode, just because I'm really enjoying them right now. And we haven't had a chance to talk much about it on the show. It's something I've gotten into very late. I just started delving into the site, and books, particularly Bayou, is one right now that I'm just really digging. But there's just a wonder. I'm enjoying the contest for May that's going on right now for all the competitors that are on there. It's great to take a look at up-and-coming writers and artists or professionals that are trying some new things with comics. It's always fun to see that comics break barriers and they can tell any kind of story, and that's definitely a place that you want to go to if you haven't. With summer coming for me, my goal over the summer is to really kind of update some of the sections of the site and kind of move things around a little bit to make them easier to find. I love the way the main page looks right now, and I want to thank the great Mr. Chibi from the forums for helping out with that. I just want to update and tweak the rest of the site and make some interesting links for you guys to get to. But I want to thank Super Mandy from the forums also, too. She's constantly updating Life in the Gutter. Every week there's a new Life in the Gutter that's up there. If you haven't read this, it's a wonderful blog, and make sure you check it out because it's some great writing and well worth reading out. If anybody else has any ideas for blogs or articles or content they want to do for the website, remember, we've got a contest coming up that we are going to be... Next episode, I'm going to pick a winner. So this week will be like the last week. So you've got about 7 days now. If you haven't had a chance to submit an entry for this one, remember, entries, if they come in later than that, will go towards the next contest. I hold on to all of them. Our goal with these contests is really to get as many people on the show as possible in full-blown segments. Basically, the winner of our contest is going to pick the next... in-stock trades Rage of the Month that we're going to do. So it's your chance to do that. I'm going to pick one next week so that we can start getting ready to announce that after we do Long Halloween. I had planned to do Long Halloween for our next episode, and just because Jim and I's schedule, that isn't going to work out next week. It will be the week after, and I apologize for that. Jim and I are in an incredibly hectic time of the year right now, so as you saw, I pulled Micah in for the Blackest Night segment just because I wanted to make sure the show's got to go on. So, and I want to thank Russell Burlingame for joining us so we could finally talk Booster Gold. So those are some things coming up. We have a segment coming up with Alan Pasalacqua, colorist on Trinity, that I want to get in before Trinity ends, just to kind of, as a kind of a wrap-up to take a look at his work on Trinity. He also has an announcement that we want to share on there that's pretty exciting, that I'm really excited about chatting with. A couple of them, actually, that are really great. So we're going to get Alan on for our next episode, so... really excited for that. So some big things coming up with Raging Bullets over the next few weeks, and Long Halloween is coming, I promise, the long-awaited one. I'm actually all ready with my notes and everything. Jim and I just need to sit down and record it. So fans who've been waiting for Long Halloween, it's coming. Listen on the end of this episode for the interview about Roddenberry.com. We had a chance to chat with that. It's kind of a fun thing. I'm excited for the Star Trek film, like I'm sure a lot of you guys are. And this is a great chance to take a look at Gene Roddenberry and some of the themes that Gene Roddenberry created. So this interview was a lot of fun for me in New York, and I've been saving this one as I've got a lot of New York content, and I've been trying to put them on gradually on the Raging Reel, which I'm going to kind of save from here on out as something where we can kind of put on things that fall outside of our normal show content as bonus features. And that's what it really is. This is a bonus feature, and hopefully it'll be something that you find enjoyable. Anyway, we will see you in about a week. I'm going to try to come back a little bit sooner, maybe with a Speeding Bullets segment with Jim and perhaps some listener voicemails. I don't know. This is my end of the school year, so I don't know how viable that is, but we'll definitely be back in a week. So we will see you then.
Bye.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 5'3". No, I'm sorry. I am 5'3", though. It's a distinct character.
I like how this all of a sudden turned into a dating interview.
Yeah.
It's like,
Is that bad?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. No, my name is Trevor Roth. I'm the COO of Roddenberry Productions. Okay. I work with my business partner, Rod Roddenberry, who is the son of Gene Roddenberry and the late Majel Roddenberry. Okay. And we essentially are just continuing the mission of Roddenberry by bringing quality and substantive science fiction to people around the world.
What are some of the things that you guys are bringing to the table? What are you guys looking to?
Yeah, actually, 2009 should be a really interesting year for us. We're actually here at New York to announce that we're going to be creating a brand new comic book. It will be executed in a way that no other comic book has been executed, cool. And it will deal with something that no other comic book, to our knowledge, has dealt with before. We're dealing with Archaea Publishing. Okay. And they're going to help us create this masterpiece, which should be out later this year. And it's called Days Missing. Days Missing, and it should be something that really wows people. We're really, really excited about it. And unfortunately, I can only say there will be more to come on that. Right, because you can't give us the details at this point in time. Yes. Will that be distributed then through Diamond or through... It'll probably be, Diamond obviously rules the world, as everyone knows. and it will be distributed through them as well as via our website, roddenberry.com, and Archaea. There will be special things that you can get at each of the websites if you choose to get things that way. So we're looking at a really interesting way of approaching this and executing it, including distribution. So overall, it should be hopefully somewhat revolutionary, as Roddenberry tends to be in all the things it does.
Now, if people are looking for more information about this and they want to follow the progress, roddenberry.com.
You can always go to roddenberry.com. It includes information or links to pages for all the things we're doing. It will also be available soon at daysmissing.com if you want to know about that particular project. But if you want to go to roddenberry.com, you can also learn about our other web comics that we recently launched that are doing really, really well, and actually will continue this year, but also turn into animation this year.
Oh, nice.
Which we're very excited about as well. They're really interesting, actually. Founded in who we are, if you will. Gene's Journal is about young Gene Roddenberry, who, I tell people that, the secret is out, of course. Gene Roddenberry was not a genius. It's all a lie. We've fooled you for years. The fact of the matter is that when he was very young, he was abducted by aliens. And Gene's Journal tells this story, of course, about how he was abducted and all of his adventures and such, and the things he wrote down in his journal, which he later discovered as an adult, and were the impetus for many of the things he created in regard to Star Trek, Earth Final Conflict, Andromeda, can be seen actually in Gene's Journal. So you get to relive and recreate the origins of your favorite characters, monologues, circumstances, all those kinds of things that you've seen in the shows that you loved and enjoyed, but from a new perspective.
And what the nice thing about that is, too, though, it sounds like it's going to be something that will be very accessible to people maybe who've had no exposure to Gene's work. They can kind of use that as a jumping on point to kind of, and then maybe branch off and actually then take a look at some of the things that he did from that animation standpoint as well.
Absolutely, most assuredly, it's definitely something that we've made sure is as relatable or accessible to everybody. Gene's Journal has kind of those wink-wink, inside joke kind of things for those people who know. At the same time, it's a brilliant strip. It's actually written and cartooned by a gentleman named David Reddick. Okay. He did Trek Life. He also works on Garfield. And we joined up with him. We created this concept, and he brings it to life twice a week, every week. And it's just phenomenal, and it allows you to really look sort of behind the scenes at what Gene might have been at a younger age, and the creator of all these amazing things, but in a very unique circumstance, I suppose.
Oh, that's fun. I'm a big fan of things like that, where it's like where I can read it with my wife, or I can like in the animation case, I can watch it with my wife who doesn't have as much exposure to it. Yeah. So there's something there for both of us, which is
absolutely. And for you might be laughing a little bit more than your wife every so often, and then have to explain to her why. but it's that's that launching point, which I'm a big fan of. It gives a... We find it similar to, Disney movies. If you've ever seen, the Disney movies nowadays, they realize, look, we got to have some adult humor in there so that the parents are having a good time too. And similar to that, I think for the real geeks out there, the real Roddenberry fans, there's a lot more in there. But for those who don't know it, they still really have a great time watching it as children do Disney's, even if a few of the things they kind of miss here and there. And for people like you can always explain them to your wife, and she can kind of get into the know.
DC's publishing a comic called Tiny Titans right now, and Tiny Titans has a lot of inside jokes for Teen Titans fans. But it's a very accessible book then for children who have never experienced these characters before or anything like that. But again, like you're talking about, there's something that's there. It's for everybody. Shrek movies are a great example of where I will laugh at things in the Shrek movie my nieces and nephews don't get.
Yeah. So, I think that the Roddenberry legacy has really left us with a feeling of wanting to include. And that said, obviously what we want to create is something that is great for everybody in a way, but if it's specific to some people in a further extent, that's always great. So we definitely want to make sure that something we're creating is something that everyone can enjoy, and give a little nods, little tips of the hat to those people who've been with us so long.
Well, you just think about just the innovation that is Roddenberry. I'm really glad to hear that this is going to be something completely a little bit different. We're going to look at just the comic books, look at the cartoons, look at all that in a different light, because that was one of the things that say what you will about Star Trek. There's like just so much first time ever was this, first time was this, first time was this in this one show, and that was always the thing that always impressed me even now, because I didn't live through the first wave of the Next Generation. age of Star Trek, but it's still, I can look back and say, man, that was cool. So now we have this generations of, man, that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's most assuredly what we're going for. We're not in the business of trying to recreate Star Trek. Star Trek, while I think it got a long life ahead of it, it was created by Gene, and we want to, provide that legacy on its front alone and have it be what it was. I think what we're trying to do is continue to create really quality programming in the area of science fiction that really makes you think, that really allows you to understand people and humanity better, that has somewhat of an optimistic look in things, that it entertains you at the same time. The web comics, are really meant to be a quick piece of entertainment, and as they get further into cartoons and animations, I think you'll get even more Roddenberry in them all the time. But the idea is really to make sure that, when you're spending any time on the computer or in front of a television or in front of a movie screen or reading a comic book, that you feel like, wow, that was time well spent and that was money well spent for me as far as what I got out of it in science fiction, and it came from a quality place, Roddenberry.
With the new movie coming out in 2009, this is a great time for fans because we're all looking for more. We're all looking for things to latch onto. And I think for science fiction especially, this feels like the year that really, it's the year of science fiction, I think, where, this is really, you're seeing more television shows like that now. They're targeting, and I'm ready. I'm ready for more sci-fi. I'm really excited for this right now.
Yeah, I think, for us, it's most assuredly a great time for science fiction. It's a category that's blowing up right now. A lot of people are giving it the credits that it didn't used to have.
Thank you.
So we're very happy about that. Thank you guys all out there for doing that. In addition to that, I really feel like science fiction is an expanding field in certain ways. When Gene came along, science fiction meant aliens and outer space and maybe futuristic time travel type of things, and that's really where it landed. Nowadays you go to a sci-fi convention, as we are here today.
Absolutely.
You see superheroes and supernatural and the weird and mysterious and all those kinds of things now fit into what we call science fiction, which is amazing for us because as creators, we now have a much larger arena to work within and a much larger playground to play within in regard to being able to create something amazing and once again substantive, and yet still have it be not exactly what the model of science fiction originally was actually, and that's fantastic for us.
It's a great medium, and one of the revolutionary things about this medium has been is that it can go anywhere, it can do anything, and we want it to. As fans, we want to be surprised, we want to feel the innovation, we want to feel people playing with the toys, because that's what this is escapist fiction. This is what we go to it for. So that to me is.
I think also, I have to say that, and this is key to our success as well as our future, is that, science fiction, and I hate to say it, but, a lot of science fiction out there is still, kind of, sadly, executives have caught on to, this could be a moneymaker for us and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And, science fiction, some of it has gotten into the, okay, what else can we do with CGI? What else can we do with the explosions? What else can we do with action and sex and things like that? And I think, what's really, really important to us is, while we love those things, and you see, even in Star Trek, they dealt with shorter skirts and showing navels and, all these kinds of things of kissing and girls and Kirk and, all this stuff. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, there has to be a really good story underneath it all. There has to be some serious, investigation of humanity and human beings. Gene Roddenberry, it's so funny to me. I always say he went across the universe, just to basically turn around and put a mirror to ourselves and say, okay, who are we as people? And we want to make sure that we're continuing to do that, to explore that human condition, because we believe that brings science fiction to a level that is not only accessible to people and relevant to them, but also much more layered in regard to the depth of it and really quality, as opposed to, once again, sort of just focusing on those things that we can do with computers and such these days.
Right.
Which are great, by the way.
No, and I agree with that. And I think that's one of the things that I'm enjoying to see, that revolution now, because for a while there, you're right, it became more of the special effects than the story. Mm-hmm. And when you have both of them together, that's when you get real magic. That's the part where we're turning our heads and we're looking at it. I think that's why for a while there, sci-fi felt like, to me, it was on a downturn where people weren't as interested in it anymore, because I think they forgot that back in the days when you didn't have the kind of effects that you're able to do now, kind of the tricks and toys you had now, what brought you in was the fact that they made you believe.
Yeah.
And I think now that we have the special effects, if you've got stories that make you believe, that take you to that place that, even though you know it's way out there, it's wacky and it's, playing in places that you've never seen before, you believe it for that time that you're there. And that to me is...
Making a believable story in which you can suspend your disbelief is most assuredly one of the most important things in science fiction. It's a craft, undoubtedly, and it's something that we hope that we've mastered. I think if you go online, once again, to rodnorge.com, and you look at Gene's Journal, or you look at Rod and Barry, which is the other one that we've created for the web, which is, in honor, actually, of people like yourselves, just to let you know. We've had so many fans that we've appreciated over the years that we decided, is there a way that we can create a comic that speaks about those fans? And so, we were walking around conventions and hearing the discussions you hear all the time and debates and arguments, and we said, can we put that under the spotlight? And we created Rod and Barry, which are two aliens who have been sent down to Earth for the purpose of scouting it for annihilation. And in doing so, they happen upon science fiction entertainment. And they're hooked immediately. They become sci-fi junkies, living, breathing, debating, arguing about science fiction. Everything that you would hear in the the line for the concessions over in the corner or the bathroom or where have you here, where people are just talking about their favorite science fiction and the goods and bads of it and arguing the points of it, and all those conversations such that literally our audience almost feeds what we put into the strip. So it's a great cyclical relationship, and it truly is in honor of the people who have for 40 or more years supported Roddenberry and what it represents.
And that's great, because it's validation that Roddenberry cares about the fans. And when you go there, it's we feel a part of that community. We feel a part of that environment. We all want to feel a part of this. It's something that it's a nice thing about the internet nowadays is we have these ways to connect, new ways to connect and get content, get information, and be, and to further enjoy that. That's, to me, that you're nailing everything that I, as a fan, am looking for.
Well, we hope so. I mean, we so tremendously appreciate people like yourselves and anybody who would be listening to this, because we know that as people who forged, a lot of area in the science fiction category, that fans, especially in our history, and we can point to it time and time again, are what have kept us successful and on top of our games. They kept us on the air in 1967 and 68. They've continued to help progress Star Trek and all of our other shows. They continue to be with us day in and day out in regard to our merchandise, which you can also find as our history at roddenberry.com. Fans really are what keep this going, and the people who come and listen to what you do, the people like yourselves who take the time to do what you do, and the people who enjoy any of the entertainment we create are all the reason why we're here.
Well, I urge all of my listeners, with the Star Trek movie coming out this year, we're all...
movie?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. But I'm so glad.
With the trailers, people are going online looking for trailers. They're looking for more information, all that stuff. This is great, because as you're looking for more, visit roddenberry.com and get connected this way. This is more content for you while you're waiting for this. This is a great way to get kind of engrossed and excited for all that.
Yeah, one thing that I haven't spoken of, we're actually finishing up a documentary. The documentary is called Trek Nation. Okay. And it's a very unique look at Gene Roddenberry through the eyes of his only son, which is a very interesting perspective, if you will. And it really, actually, a number of people have talked to us about screening it and things like that. And the reason is because it really brings a certain amount of environment to the new Star Trek coming out. It kind of gives a little bit of understanding of where it all started, where it all came from, which we think is a great piece of information for people to have before going to see this new movie, which is a brand new incarnation of something that started so long ago that it actually is the longest running entertainment entity to our knowledge.
Which is great, because I think obviously there's classic Trek fans that are really excited right now, but there's also a whole new generation of people that have never seen Trek before that right now are going to be exposed for the first time for this. So that's where I think this site is going to be not only something for classic fans, but for new fans who are looking to get kind of okay, what is the history of this?
I think that, what we try and do obviously is speak to the Roddenberry side of things, of course, at all times, making sure that we're kind of living up to that standard. And while we are not, complete decision makers as far as Star Trek goes,
right.
It's obviously part of our legacy. So we want to make sure that people understand, almost what should or should not they be looking for in a Roddenberry entity. And that's, as we create new things as well as other things get created like the new Star Trek, for us, there's certain rules in Star Trek. It's been going so long. There's such a universe of like, this can happen and that can't happen and so on and so forth. But for us, really the rules are, okay, does it have those certain qualitative things that we're looking for? Is there an intelligence to this science fiction? Does it follow, the agenda of investigating humanity in certain ways? Does it look at humanity from a certain perspective? These larger philosophical issues are what we look for in the new Star Treks. While we definitely want to keep it as close as we can, it has to evolve over time for new audiences, and the keys to us are those fundamentals, which we understand, JJ is definitely taking into account, so we're very excited about seeing the final product.
Yeah, and it's great for us as fans, though, to see that there is that rich legacy and to be able to connect with it. So I want to thank you for stopping by. Is there anything else you want to shout out before?
Not really. Please visit roddenberry.com to learn about all the stuff that's going on. I think that you'll see, if you are a fan of the new Star Trek, if you are a fan of the old Star Trek, or any of the other shows that were created, you will see the soul of Roddenberry and everything we create, and we think that is definitely something that is lacking a little bit in today's world, and we hope to bring back time and time again over the years.
Well, I know I'm going to be following the progress of the site and checking these things out, so I want to thank you very much for stopping by and taking the time to chat with us.
Absolutely. It was great meeting you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.